So are we live now?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, now we're live on YouTube.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Ag, Public Lands and Water Resources, Natural Resources Committee. I'm a little new to this committee, so I've been on it before, but I chaired transportation. So bear with us as we go through some bills that in fact, most of the committees new to some of these interim bills. We'll be going over trying to accomplish four bills. We have 4 hours to do it in, and we'll stop on that 4th hour. So if we don't get a bill finished or don't think we can finish it, we may not start it. I think these bills are fairly straightforward. There's an amendment or two that we probably need to do on one that I know of. And usually during these meetings, committee will have testimony from agencies and people affected by the bills. So anyhow, Abigail, we're ready to start. I call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Chairman, for roll call, Representative Blackburn,
Here.
Representative Clausen,
Here.
Representative Fortner,
Here.
Representative Heiner,
Here.
Representative Larson,
Here.
Representative Western,
Here.
Representative Wharf,
Here.
and Representative Winter, who I see is joining.
Oh, good. Welcome, John. Now, Representative Winter. We're doing roll call. Holler here if you can, or put your thumb up. There you are.
I'm here.
All right.
Sorry, I couldn't get on the dang thing.
I figured it was something like that.
And then Chairman Eklund.
Oh, here. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
All right, good. Well, like I said, welcome, people. Our first bill for consideration is the omnibus water bill. I gave a brief explanation to the committee on our water bills. We have two of them. One of them is the construction bill that starts in the House. The other one is the planning bill. It starts in the Senate. And the presentation will be done, or the help that we get will mostly be from Director Gephardt. Brandon Gephardt is our Water Development Office man, and his staff will be there as well. There may be other testimony concerning the bill. The bill's been worked at several levels. This one, we spend a lot of money doing this and developing water in Wyoming. So it goes through several levels of planning. Morning, Director Gephardt. I see you're on the screen now. I was explaining how the water bill works. Water development goes through the projects that are applied for, and they start well in advance of this. Sometimes it could take 15 years to do some of the projects we're hoping to get done, like reservoirs. By the time you go through all of the environmental things and regulation stuff that you have to do. But this bill has been fairly well gone over by the office and the Water Development Commission, and then the Select Water Committee has the honor of being involved in it as well. Representative Larson and I are both on that committee, and I'm looking around. I think we're the only ones on the Ag Committee that are. So I think with that, Director Gephardt, you may go ahead and begin your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to you and members of the committee. Thanks for having me and spending a little time with me this morning. Great to see you guys all. So yes, to tack on to what Chairman Eklund, the process for this, each of these projects go through various stages of vetting, if you will, both through our commission and then most of our commission meetings are joint meetings with Select Water, as Chairman mentioned. And so these projects have been reviewed and reviewed and reviewed. So this is a pretty well vetted process. It's a standard process. And with that, I'll go ahead and start talking about the bill itself. I emailed out a copy of what we called the Blue Book. Within that Blue Book, I think one of the easiest things to look at is probably the spreadsheet that's on page 2 of the PDF. And if you'd prefer, I can share that, or if you guys just want to follow along on your version, that's fine as well. But immediately following that spreadsheet is the actual bill itself. But I typically look at the spreadsheet and then I can explain any projects. So what I would propose to do is just go through the projects that are in the bill. And then if there are specific questions about any of the projects anybody has, we can stop and I can answer any specific questions to that if you would like. So the first project in the House Bill 44, which is the omnibus water bill for construction, is cloud seeding the Medicine Bow Sierra Madre Ranges 2021 project. This is a continuation of the cloud seeding that we do. This is our air-based project, and the appropriation for this is $728,000. The actual project cost is more than that. It's $778,000. We have funding partners. This particular project is the Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities participates in this project. And it's just a continuation of what we've done in the past and moving forward. The next project is the second cloud seeding project that we have done. This is the ground-based cloud seeding project over the Wind River Mountains. This project, we again have significant funding partners for this, mostly in the form of the lower basin states of the Colorado River. The lower basin states contribute 67% of the cost of this program. So our appropriation recommendation is for $215,000, but the actual total cost of the overall project is about $571,000. So we're paying just.
Director, we have a question.
Sure, I'm sorry.
Question. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Gebhardt, now just, maybe backfill a little bit of my knowledge. The lower basin states, it's California, Nevada, Arizona, Colorado, and Utah, right? Aren't those the lower basin states? Or if you could.
No, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. Representative Western, the upper basin consists of Wyoming, Colorado, and Utah. Lower basin is New Mexico, Nevada, Arizona, and California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We have one more question from Representative Fortner. Go ahead, Representative.
Mr. Gebhardt, I see in your data that you guys has been using silver oxide or iodide since 1940. Do you guys have an MSDS on that? Everything I use as a commercial sprayer, we have to have MSDSs on. Would you happen to have that on hand?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Fortner, I don't know that we've got it specifically. It would be something that our contractor has. We contract that work out, and then they would be responsible for all of the regulatory and permitting associated with the application.
By federal law, they're required to have that available to everybody that wants it, whether you're a city representative, a state representative, city council. They're required by law to have that information on hand. I think we probably need to have access to that. If you could find it for us, please.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Fortner, I'm just getting indication that yes, we should have a copy of that. Would you like a copy of that emailed to you?
Yes, I would, please.
We can certainly do that.
Thank you very much.
absolutely.
Go proceed, Director. I don't see any more questions.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, the next project is on page 6 of the bill. It is the Lander Well and Transmission Pipeline. This project is to connect a well field that was developed under the groundwater grant program. Previously, the wells were drilled. They're good producing wells, and this project is to provide the piping and the connections of the well field to the system. And that is a 67% grant to the city of Laramie, or Lander, excuse me. The total project cost for the project is $1.32 million. Our appropriation, which is 67% of that, is $884,400. The next project under new development is the Northwest Rural System Improvements 2021 in Park County. This project is to expand the Northwest Rural Water System and help supply and improve the supply to an area south and east of Cody called the Salt Creek subdivision. And it looks like we've got a question.
Yes. Representative Heiner, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. As I looked over, Mr. Gephardt, as I looked over this project, it looks like every year or every other year, they've been asking for more appropriations. Is this the terminus of that request, or is this a continuing project that's going to linger for years to come? We've expended quite a bit of money over the past 10, 15 years, and it seems like it's coming quite often.
Mr. Chairman, this particular project, the system itself continues to expand and grow and take on new service area. That was really the intent of having a rural system, so we don't have each of these individual pockets of water suppliers. So the original intent of the project was to expand and continue to service these additional districts. And
Follow up?
Representative Heiner, go ahead.
Yes. Do you see that this is going to be further requests in the future, or is this at the end of that project?
Go ahead and answer, Director.
yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll try to answer that. I don't think I know the answer to that. It all depends on how growth occurs and where it occurs as it gets developed up there. So I don't have an answer that this is the end of it. If it continues to grow, then they'll probably continue to expand that system.
Okay, Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I was hoping maybe I could help answer this. This is up in my area. The Northwest Rural Water is rural areas around Cody and Powell. And so I would guess that when they get requests that they may try to expand. I'm actually on it I live north of Powell. We got on, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. The Northwest Rural Water is part of the Shoshone Municipal Pipeline, and it runs all the way over to Lovell and over into that area. So it reaches a long ways up in our area.
That answer your questions, Representative. One of the things that I would say is there has been some vision to have regional water systems, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Classic example was the Madison Formation up in the northeast part of the state. Gillette isn't on a river, so it's huge growing, fast growing area. So we've got a bunch of wells into the Madison that are interconnected that feed all of the communities in that area. Sometimes that idea doesn't work real well. Laramie County would be, I could cite one instance in Laramie County. The city of Cheyenne is on one water system, and most of the little towns to the east are on wells and whatnot. And it's actually cost prohibitive to put, well, not Well, right now it's cost prohibitive to put in the pipelines. You'd look at tens of millions of dollars when you could buy a well, say in Pine Bluffs for $1 million or less and have the town have a reliable source. So anyway, it doesn't always work regionally, but I guess that, if that helps you along with what we have tried to do. Is that accurate, Director?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a lot of history with Laramie County, but I would say that the Northwest Rural System is a successful system. It's accomplished the intent of regionalization, and I believe it's well managed and well thought out, well planned, and continues to be.
Okay, no more questions. Go ahead, Director.
And Mr. Chairman, I'll try to keep looking up for hands, but if I miss something, please interrupt me.
I'll be watching.
Thank you. The next project on page 9 of the bill is the Torrington Well Connection 2021 project. This is a 67% grant. Much like the Lander Well project we talked about previously, a well has already been drilled in Torrington. This project is just connecting the well to the system. So the appropriation request is for $389,270, which is a 67% grant, and then the town is required to come up with the matching 33%. Mr. Chairman, continuing on, the next project on page 11 of the bill is the Interstate Irrigation and Reservoir Irrigation District Improvements. This project is a 67% grant to the district. And the purpose of this is to convert open ditches to pipelines. This is one segment of probably 2 phases. This is about 4.1 miles of pipeline, large diameter pipeline. They experience about 25% loss in their irrigation water. So they're increasing the efficiency. As mentioned, this 67% grant, the total appropriation request is for $2,827,400. The next project is on page 13 of the bill, is the Salt Creek Transmission Pipeline 2021 project. This is a 67% grant. I will note, and we'll talk about it in a minute, this project is contingent on a transfer request, and I'll explain the transfer request later on, but it's just a transfer from account 1 to account 2. But this particular project is to replace a pipeline between it's Midwest and Edgerton's water supply. They are fed from the Central Wyoming Regional Water System. It's quite a long pipeline, but this project is to repair or replace about 7 miles of that pipeline. They experienced a lot of corrosion on the original pipeline, experienced a lot of leaks. So this is to repair those issues. The next project on the list on page 15 of the bill is the Shoshone Irrigation District Improvements 2021. This is a material only grant. The way these work, for those that are new to this, the commission funds the materials for the project. And then the sponsor is required for all of the engineering, all of the construction oversight. So we just pay the invoices of the materials used on the project. And so this would be a 100% materials only grant in the amount of $240,000. Again, this project is contingent upon the transfer that I'll discuss in a minute too. It looks like we've got a question.
Yes, Representative Heiner, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Mr. Gephardt, I see that they are doing most of the labor and the construction phase, so they have skin in the game. But I see some of the other projects, it's mostly 100% grants between the BOR and the state. Is that typical? And being new to the game, I'm not very familiar with this, but is it typical not to have some of the downstream users or those that benefit from the water not needing to participate in the financial cost of these projects?
Mr. Chairman, I would say, Representative Heiner, I would say that a majority of our projects are not fully granted. A majority of them, we typically do a 67-33% grant loan mix. Typically, the sponsor uses their own funds or assessments to come up with that 33%. They have the option of going and getting loans for that, for their component of it. So the interstate, I believe, is what you're talking about. They did get some Bureau of Rec money. That's not the norm. That's kind of the exception.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, continue, Director.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, the next project is the site.
Director, we got additional here. Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I just want to let the committee know that I do live and I have land on the Shoshone Irrigation District. I'm planning on voting on this. I don't think it's a conflict of interest. If the committee thinks it is, I guess maybe they should let me know, but this isn't in my area, but it does affect the district I live in.
So I'll kind of add to that. We'll all find ourselves voting on things that either harm us or benefit us, and it's hard to sort that out sometimes. But if you're a large enough group in whatever, like suppose you had, well, I won't go into that, but I kind of agree that Representative Larson should be voting on this, but if you have any other conversation, we'll. Doesn't look like it. Director, I guess, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next project is the Sidon Irrigation District Rehab 2021 project. Much just like the Shoshone, this is a materials only grant. The appropriation request is for $576,000. And Mr. Chairman, that is the new projects. The next segment of the bill deals with amendments to existing projects and or some of the funds that we administer to help with these projects. And the first item under amendments on page 20 of the bill, this is a request to replenish our sponsors contingency fund for account 2. This is a contingency fund that is held within the water development, and when bids come in high or something unexpected happens during construction, we can tap into this reserve to continue the project without having to wait a year to come back through legislature to fund the project, particularly when the project's already been vetted and approved. It's just much easier for us to do this. Last couple of years, we've taken some pretty significant hits to this account. That's the reason for this request. And part of that is the environment and COVID has impacted that. The bidding climate has impacted that. But also, we're seeing larger projects in account 2, our rehab account. And so a small percentage on a large project eats up a lot of these dollars. So that's really what's happening to that account. So this request, as I mentioned, is for $1.5 million to help replenish that contingency account.
Director, I have a question.
Sure.
So COVID is affecting this. Has there been much of a look into receiving COVID stimulus funding to support this account, or those things? It's hard to use that money the way the rules are set up, but I was just curious as your staff thought about that possibility.
Mr. Chairman, we've thought about it, but it's really tough to say the impact of COVID. It's pretty anecdotal on our part. We hear that labor staffing for contractors and getting people on the ground had been impacted. So it's kind of a third tier impact on these prices. I do think it's real, but to quantify that would be very difficult. So we have not asked for COVID money.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the next project on page 21 of the bill, this is for a time extension for an existing project. This is the Ethity Water Supply Project. The reason for the extension, we've seen on the reservation projects, easements are very tough to get. This project is a victim of that, as well as another one we were talking about here in a minute. The reason for the request is they're having trouble getting easements to install the pipelines and tanks. So we're asking for a 2-year time extension for this project.
Okay,
Continuing,
go ahead.
continuing on, Mr. Chairman, the next project is our small water project program for new development account. Again, this is a reoccurring program within water development, becoming more and more popular. We've had a lot of discussions between the commission and Select Water over the interim on this. And we've kind of agreed on what the request would be for funding for this year. And that results in the request. So the request for the new development program is for $1 million. And then the small water project program rehabilitation, which is the next project, is for $500,000. That's based on some of the history of our applications and what we funded in the past. And I think what the commission and Select Water felt comfortable moving forward. So we're right now receiving those applications. And preliminarily, it looks like this funding request should cover the applications that we're receiving so far. So I think we're in a pretty good spot with those two programs. Mr. Chairman, the next project is the Arapahoe Water Supply 2016 project. This is again a time extension dealing with easements on the reservation or impact of this project. So this is time extension only. And then, Mr. Chairman, the next two projects are a little different. The first one.
Hang on a second.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think during our Select Water and the commission, there was discussion on the Arapahoe Water Supply. It's been extended quite a few years, I think. Is that not true, Director? And this may be maybe the year we don't extend it, maybe afterwards, because they just keep seeming to have an.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the discussion was on the Ethity Water Supply. That original project was a 2010. And that was the discussion that if they can't get something done within this time frame, that maybe they should reevaluate.
Thank you. I had them mixed up. Thank you.
You do, understood.
Go ahead, Director.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next project, this is fairly minor, but needs legislative change. This is the Sheridan Area Water Supply Transmission 2020 project. This is a name change of the sponsor, changing the sponsor. The reason for this is the Sheridan Area Water Supply System, SAWS, and the city of Sheridan work very closely together. And so this, as far as the operation and maintenance of this, it's really, as we were told, would be the responsibility of the city of Sheridan rather than SAWS. So we've granted their they're asked to change from the sponsor from SAWS to the city of Sheridan. So this is just a formality to change that sponsored name in the legislation. The next project, Mr. Chairman, is the Lance Creek Water and Sewer District Well Project. What we're asking for with this legislation on this project is for the ability of the commission to transfer the ownership of the well that was drilled during a level 2 study to the district. And we would relieve ourselves of any of the obligations of the well. And then the district would take complete ownership. They'd be responsible for hooking it up to their system, permitting, and all of the O&M. So it's really just selling them the well that we drilled for them. And it's providing the legislation to allow us to do that.
Okay, Representative Western, you've got a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gebhardt, for the Lance Creek project, do you have any idea on what the total costs are right now incurred by the commission to own and operate that well?
Mr. Chairman, yes, we do. And it is in the legislation. It is in the bill. The amount of money to drill the well itself was $33,000. And that's what we would ask to get recouped. The level 2 project that the well was drilled in was larger, but it was more of a study to the whole system. And so there are additional costs in that study, but the actual cost of construction of the well was $33,000, and that's what they would be required to pay.
So,
Mr. Chairman, quick follow-up.
go ahead.
Do you have any idea of the costs associated with maintaining and operating that well, Mr. Gebhardt?
Mr. Chairman, I don't, they would, some of the things that they would have to do, they'd have to install a pump, and then connecting it to their system for this particular project is very simple. It's in the proximity of their existing wells. And so it's a short amount of pipe. And then as far as the annual operation and maintenance, I would say that it's probably very comparable to what they're already doing. I don't believe it'll add a lot of O&M costs to what they're doing. And I would also say that on all of our projects, when we drill a well and the city or municipality starts operating it, they are still responsible for the O&M of the well and the pipelines, and they take that responsibility on. So that's not unusual for this request.
Okay, I have a question. So is this well is not in the Madison, is it? It's in a, looking at the money, I'm pretty sure it can't be. I guess what I would just add a few things. Lance Creek is a special problem. Turn of the century, it was one of our larger cities in Wyoming. And the reason was the oil industry was taking off, and they had oil that was pretty much coming to the surface of the ground is the reason they developed that area. And the water and the oil is mixed oftentimes. So getting a decent stock well or this or that, it's harder than some other areas and projects when we put in wells.
And Mr. Chair, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
To add on to that, I think currently the Lance Creek District may be under EPA orders with their existing wells for radionuclides, I think. So they're having troubles with their existing wells and meeting the EPA requirements. So this would be a benefit to them too. It's a better water source than what they have, and it's a producing well. So this would, I believe, would help them as well.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions? Oh, Representative Winter, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, with all these appropriations, are any of those appropriations coming out of the general fund for the state?
Mr. Chairman, I'll explain our funding. Short answer, no. All of the funding for water development program comes from the distribution of the mineral severance tax. And the way it is set up is we get a percentage of the mineral severance tax for each of our accounts, water development account 1, 2, and 3. And so new development account gets 12.4 something percent from the first 155 million of the mineral severance tax distribution. And then 3.6%, I believe, for water development account 2, and then 0.7 or some, I forget the exact numbers for water development account 3. But our entire program is funded from the revenue created through the extractive industry, energy industry.
Thank you. And here's another question. Go ahead, Representative Wharf.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have a question, and I don't want to expose my ignorance, but I'm afraid that's the only way I can ask this question. And obviously, there's a lot of money involved in this. And from understanding the presentation that Director Gephardt gave us, it appears that it's pretty much reimbursing cost. But I'm always concerned when the majority of this is covered through grants. And I wondered what they are doing to ensure that the cost or that every effort is done to minimize those costs so that we stretch those grant dollars as far as we can. And I'm assuming there's some kind of a process in place, but it's just a question I have where it's all grant money. Is somebody doing due diligence to ensure that we are getting responsible use of those funds?
Go ahead, Director.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, Representative Wharf, I'll kind of explain the way our program works. And to answer your question shortly, we feel, yes, we vet these projects very well. They typically start out with a level 1 study through our program, and that's administered by us, and we hire consultants to do these studies. We review them, work through each of the projects, each of the studies with them. We evaluate alternatives, and ultimately we feel like we pick the preferred alternative for each of these projects. And then as they go through our program, some require a little bit additional vetting to a little further design, look at alternatives to make sure that we are investing the state's dollars appropriately. We take a lot of pride in making sure that we're doing that appropriately. So I feel that this process is very well vetted, and we do look at the alternatives. It's not necessarily the wish of a sponsor as much as it is what's best for that particular issue. I feel that we do a good job of vetting the costs.
That help you, Representative Wharf. Go ahead, Representative Fortner.
Thank you, Chairman. I see at the bottom of the list down here where it says totals for planning bill, it says SF 0037, and then that's got total over there of 6,679,454. That's a fourth of the whole process. Can you guys find it cheaper somewhere else, or is that normally what you pay?
Mr. Chairman, so the planning bill that you guys will be seeing after the crossover, I believe that's what you're referring to, and that's part of the process I was trying to explain to Representative Wharf, that's the planning studies that the agency performs, and those are where we do studies, master plan studies, pipeline studies, transmission studies. And so that's how we vet these projects and make the determination that it is a good investment of state's money. And so when we get to the planning bill, there are multiple projects associated with that. This year in particular, that number is pretty high. And the reason for that is we've got a significant funding request for the Laprelle Dam project. To continue with that issue, I don't know if you're familiar with Laprelle. It's a dam that we started studies for the Laprelle Irrigation District. And through these studies, we found out that the dam has reached its useful life. So it's a significant safety hazard at this point. They're under orders through the SEO to reduce what they can store. So we're continuing with design and permitting to fix that dam. So of this roughly $6 million for planning, 4.3 of that is dedicated to furthering the Laprelle Dam project. And that will be coming in front of you after the crossover. But typically in a normal year of our appropriations, planning equates to about 7% of our combined costs, and construction is typically about 93%. So a majority of the funds go to putting things on the ground. This is an unusual year.
Thank you very much.
Representative Heiner. Let me interject something. There, oh dear. I don't know if you got feedback. I just did. There is no question that's ignorant enough. Don't worry about it. This is how we learn. We have somebody here who can help us along in the process. We're spending a lot of money. It's the people's money. So these are good questions to ask.
Absolutely.
Go ahead. Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Gephardt, along those same lines as the chairman just mentioned, as I go through these appropriations for the various projects and districts, I see that some of the projects are funded almost 100%, such as the interstate pipeline with the BOR grant and the state of Wyoming grant. There's no downstream encumbrance upon the users of that water. And yet I look at the ETHET project where it's 50-50. So I'm struggling to understand how you decide how much of a grant to give to one project at 100% with the BOR, and another project they only get 50% of the project as a grant. And so it doesn't seem to be any consistency there amongst the projects. And so maybe you could explain that to me, how you vet those and decide how much of a grant to give to the different projects.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. Typically through our program, we offer a 67% grant, 33% loan. Occasionally, some of these sponsors will be able to go find additional funding that they can contribute. And I believe that in the case of the ETHD water supply project, I believe that they had some tribal money that they contributed to it. And so with the amount of money that they were able to provide for that specific project, we reduced our percentage so that they're still getting a portion of our funding, but they're also getting funding from other sources that they're able to get more funding from other sources that exceeds the 33%. So we reduced our grant amount. And again, I believe that's probably not the norm. That's one of the exceptions, but it does occur occasionally.
Representative Heiner.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. So with that logic, why didn't we reduce the interstate grant? Because they found BOR money for a third of the project. Why didn't we reduce that grant to 50% like you did for the ETHET project?
Mr. Chairman, it was my understanding that, well, and interstate is a little more complex because they've got a whole bunch of work yet to do. They'll be coming back to us for another request for another 13 miles of pipe or something to that effect. But they were able to, the amount of funding that they were able to find equates to about 33%. Whereas if they were able to find more funding for that, we would have reduced our percentage more than likely for that. But what they were able to find and bring to the table was the grant loan mix we offered. And that grant loan mix is our standard offer to sponsors at this point.
Okay, any other questions? Something I guess I would say here is that usually our water development office looks through the different funding options they have. And if we can avoid spending out of our state dollars, we try to do that by supplementing Bureau of Reclamation. Those are special projects that usually the dam or the system was built by the Bureau of Rec. So that's money. You know, if the federal government will help us rebuild a dam, then we will accept that money gladly. And there's a revolving water drinking fund, and there's some other ones, salinity control, a variety of federal programs that help us offset costs. As a state, because this is funded by minerals, the program is they've taken the same hits as every other agency in the state. So our water programs, we just have to be cautious on how much we're gonna spend of state money. It's been a difficult deal. The other thing that I would say is that if we ever, each time we get out of the normal process that we have with Water Development Office developing water for whatever, and we take on a project and throw something in without proper planning, we really mess it up. I can think of 3 or 4 different times that we've jumped in and done things upon request of the chief executive or somebody to try to fix something. Unintended consequences of not having this well planned out, well thought out processes. Anyway, I would hope that all of our agencies operate a little bit like the Water Development Office. But if that helps you any on information. What's that?
Mr. Chairman, then to finish up with the bill, and then be happy to answer any other questions anybody has, but to finish up with the bill, section 3 of the bill on page 26, really what this request is, this is a transfer of internal money. We've got more money in account 1 than we did in account 2. We've got a significant request for our account 2. So what we're asking for with this transfer of funds of 7.5 million is to transfer from the money that we have in a statutory setup account 1 to account 2 to fund these projects. And that does include, we'll talk about another transfer specific to LaPrelle, but just because of the demands this given year, we're asking for this transfer to shift the money from account 1 to account 2 through the bill.
Okay, committee, any questions?
Mr. Chairman, and I would also offer, I realize that we do have some new legislators. If you have any questions about how the program operates, what the program does, we could prepare some materials briefly, but I would be more than happy to have conversations to explain what we do and how we do it. And if there's a group of folks that would like to do it, we could prepare a presentation. We'd be happy to do that, to help educate you on what we do. I know it's pretty complex, and to digest it all through discussion of a bill is probably drinking through a fire hose. So we'd be happy to help with any way we can.
I could do the same thing. I think Representative Larson and I could go on and on about the different things that go on in select water and between the commission and the interactions between all 3 entities. And I'll speak up for the bill. I think it's an important bill to everybody in the state. At some point in time, your own communities will be affected and helped by this. As we see our revenues decreasing and we see the revenue, a big hit to this. I won't get into it. I'd just be getting into the weeds, but as we proceed, at some point in time, we may have to change the percentage of grant funding or other things. I don't know what's down the road, but for now, we've been able, you can go back to your constituents and they're, they might be upset that they didn't get this or that, but you can about always come up with a water program that helped your little towns and your irrigation districts and the people around the state. So any other questions? And I don't believe we have any amendments. The changes have already been made. Committee, are we ready? Go ahead. What? Oh, Representative Larson.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I jumped out for a second. Have we moved the bill?
Oh, we haven't. So committee, what's your
I'll
pleasure?
move the bill.
Okay, bill's been moved by Representative Larson, and I don't know who.
Second.
Several. We'll go with Representative Wharf. Abigail, come on, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, did you want to take any additional public comment? Hunter Pesh has her hand up and would like to speak.
Yes, let's shake off the rust here is the term we use, and thank you, committee and staff, for helping me with this. We'll take public comment. You know what, we're a little out of order, but we can move the bill and continue to take testimony. Go ahead, Hunter. Good to see you. Welcome to our committee.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, and members of committee. I am Hunter Petch. I'm the new executive director for the Wyoming Association of Conservation Districts, and we stand in support of the omnibus water bill construction and in support to the changes made to the small water development projects. And we ask for your continued support. Conservation districts support the continued funding for this program. We are also in support of the change that is made throughout the small water project programs, that small water project sponsors determines if the small water project meets the definition of a public work. The average cost per ad is around $120 across the state, varying on location. In one instance, a conservation district that is heavily involved in the small water project program averaged approximately 35 projects in the last 4 years. Their total annual expenditure on advertising was around $3,600 for 1 year. This is paid half by the state through the small water project program and half by the district. The change provides the opportunity to save money for advertising where it is not necessarily needed or justified. With that, I will stand for any questions. Thank you.
Committee questions? Thank you, Hunter.
Thank you.
Okay. Abigail, do we have anyone else in the waiting room?
Mr. Chairman, nobody has their hands up to speak on this issue.
Okay. So we're a little out of order, but the bill's been moved and seconded, and we've had some discussion on it. Is there further discussion? Representative Larson, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry for getting out of order. I do think there is at least one amendment, maybe two. And when you're ready, I'd present one of them.
Okay. I think go ahead, Representative Larson.
The one that I have deals with the Seminole Reservoir, and I think I sent it out this morning to the committee, and I would hope that Director Gephardt would kind of discuss that for us, and then we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Director, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what's going on is this continuing thing. The Select Water Committee asked the commission to look into a contract that we have with the City of Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities. And the reason behind the contract that we have, and it pertains to marketing excess water from the Stage 2 project originally. And this water is stored in the Seminole Reservoir under a storage account that the Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities has. But it goes back to, and I forget when this project started, but it's quite some time ago, probably in the 70s or 80s. But as part of that appropriation, a negotiation was made that the commission could market excess water from the Stage 2 project and then create any revenues that would be generated from that market sale of that water. That resulted in a contract that we still have with the Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities. And then as part of that contract and our ability to market that water, we share in the O&M costs of the storage in Seminole. So any dam O&M costs, it's a Bureau facility, but they pass on the O&M costs. So anytime that something is modified or improved at the reservoir, each of the shareholders in the storage have to help pay for that. And so this contract ties into that. So we have been paying for essentially our portion of storage through this agreement of the O&M costs. And we were asked to look into that to see if that's something that is still valuable to us or not. I would go on to explain that the reason we were involved in that and the reason that the commission wanted the ability to market money, as it was explained to me, was to help protect some of the municipalities downstream of Seminole on the Platte system. This all kind of came about, I believe, when the North Platte was kind of being scrutinized. And so the state, through the Water Development Commission, wanted to help provide a little pool of water that if it were needed by the municipality generally or anybody else, that there would be some water available. With the development of the Platte River program, the decree, and then ultimately the modification to Pathfinder Dam, we feel more comfortable with our ability to supply the municipalities and other users with state's interest. So this agreement that we're talking about has essentially gone dormant. We have not been marketing any of the water. We've not been creating any revenues from it, but we continue to pay O&M costs on our portion of the storage. So I had a meeting with the Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities. I presented this idea to them that maybe we want out of the statute where we have the ability to market excess water. So in those discussions, the board, they mentioned that, yeah, it'll be a financial hit to them, but they're committed to continuing with their storage, even without the state's involvement, and they would continue to maintain their storage. And they have agreed that by changing statute to relieve us of this obligation, that they would support that. And I think part of the reason for the legislation as well is to help secure the funding that we did originally. And you'll see that there was a sunset date on that appropriation of the year 2036. I surmise that the original loan portion had a sunset date of the same day. So it was to help secure any payments that they would still be making to us. Those payments have all been repaid years ago. There is no debt related to that project. So this is just kind of I would say that this is just a continuation of, or this has probably become dormant because it's not needed. And so that's the main reason for the amendment that Representative Larson is presenting.
Okay, Representative Larson and then Representative Western.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Can you clarify how this benefits Cheyenne? Is it such that they can use water in a different drainage and then they could replace that water from Seminole? And then I have a couple other questions if you want me to ask those now.
I'll try to answer the first question, Mr. Chairman. So part of the water that supplies the city of Cheyenne is a transbasin diversion. And it's from the Sierra Madres, and it's done through an exchange. And I hope I don't butcher this because I'm not intimately familiar with it, but I know enough to be dangerous probably. But it's performed through an exchange from water provided from the Sierra Madres, and then they put that into the Platte system, and then they extract on the other side of the river into Rob Roy, and then Rob Roy is actually piped into the city for that water. So the water that they're taking from Rob Roy, a portion of that is offset by the water that comes from Hog Park into the Platte system. And when the Hog Park system can supply more water than what they take out of the Rob Roy system, I believe that's what we call the excess water that sits in the Platte system. And so they have a pool of storage water in Seminole to help collect that. And then how they can use that, I'm not real sure. I believe that they can use it to offset exchanges in any given year. And then, of course, this idea of marketing, but the marketing I don't know has occurred for, last one I've seen is a contract for 2005 was the last time that water was temporarily leased. Does that answer your question, Representative Larson?
Yeah, so, yeah, Director, that was a really good condensation of probably as complex a water system as there is in the country. So thank you. And Representative Larson, and then I'll get you other guys here in a bit.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank you, Director. Another couple questions. How much is the O&M cost per year that we've been paying, just so people would know? And how much storage is this, how many acre feet?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the average annual payments that we've been making for our portion of the storage, and that storage that we're a part of equates to 5,000 acre feet. And so our annual payments have been around $24,000, $25,000 a year.
Okay, Representative Western, do you still have a question?
Mr. Chairman, I withdraw my question.
Okay, Representative Blackburn, your turn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sir, it doesn't sound like what we're going to do here with this amendment is going to hurt Cheyenne too much as far as availability of water. Am I understanding that correctly?
Mr. Chairman, that's completely accurate. It has no impact or bearing on their available water. As I mentioned, it does impact them a little bit financially, but they are fully committed and they have supported this. I have had lengthy conversations with them, and they're very willing to work with us on this.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, so go ahead, Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if I moved this amendment, but I will do that.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second to the amendment?
Second.
Been moved and seconded by Blackburn, moved by Larson. Committee, are you ready to vote? Okay, we'll do it with the raise of hands. I think we can do, yeah, I'm sure we can do it that way. So I have a unanimous vote on that amendment. Abigail and Jonathan. Thank you, Representative Larson. So any other amendments to the bill?
Question on the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Well, wait, hang on just a second. Art, did you have another amendment, Representative Larson?
Mr. Chairman, did we deal with the one that was at the very end? I'm not sure on the Sheridan issue. Maybe Director can let us know if that is included in this already.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, the Sheridan name change is already in the bill, so there would not need to be an amendment for that. That's already in the bill.
All right.
Question.
Okay, question's been called on the bill. Abby, go ahead with the roll call vote.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote on House Bill 44 as amended. Representative Blackburn,
Aye.
Representative Clausen,
Aye.
Representative Fortner,
Aye.
Representative Heiner,
Aye.
Representative Larson,
Aye.
Representative Western,
Aye.
Representative Wharf,
Representative Wharf votes aye.
Representative Winter,
Aye.
and Chairman Eklund.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, House Bill 44 is passed as amended.
Thank you. Maybe the next bill for our committee, thank you, Director. Appreciate all of that help. And if the committee has any questions, at some point in time, I'd like to sit down and visit more about this because we always have little sticking points and little parts of it that with good explanation, I think people, if they understand it, usually it resolves differences that you might have or things that you dislike about this kind of a bill. It's a big one and it's important, but it's important to the state of Wyoming. And I'd like for the Ag Committee to be as well versed in it as possible. So the next bill for consideration is, got the wrong set of bills there. It's the change of notification on water right. I'm looking for the bill number. And that, folks, took us an hour and 15 minutes. So if we're going to get done, we'll have to do a little better on some of them. But if we don't get done with all four bills, we'll be fine too. I don't think we should rush through them either. So changes to water right. Yeah, Representative Winter, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would agree with your assessment that we need to get together and discuss a lot of these things. I think it would help me as well as probably other folks. See, that bill you're looking for is number 45, I believe.
Yes, I did just find it. Thank you, Representative. And Abigail, can we run a Zoom meeting of some kind where the whole committee could meet at a certain time? I don't know if other committees have done that or not.
Mr. Chairman, I believe Senator Case has set up an informal working group.
Okay.
If that is something you're interested in, LSO does not staff those. We can put it on the website as it won't be noticed as a committee meeting, however.
Okay.
So you can get back to me on that, Mr. Chairman, if that's something you're interested in.
Okay, I will. I hate to run the meetings without the public involved, but this COVID-19.
Right, Mr. And that was something Senator Case was, they wanted it on the website at least with a web link that the public could get into. Yeah.
Well, it'd be an informal discussion, Ag Committee, and a way of getting to know one another. This virtual way is not my idea of an ideal situation. So next bill for our consideration is House Bill 45. Director, are you done? We're waving goodbye. Thank you, sir, for your help. House Bill 45, changes to water right notice requirements for hearing. We have our state engineer who will probably walk us through the bill and the reason for the bill. Are you ready? Mr. Lanning, are you ready to go? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Greg Lanning. I'm the director of the State Engineer's Office, and it's good to see you and welcome committee. I appreciate this opportunity to talk to you for a brief moment. I appreciate the chairman's comments on holy cow, an hour and a half on that first one. But obviously, and as you guys put it out, there's a lot of money, $17 million, and some good projects. Mine is quite a change in direction. It's relatively simple and it should go relatively fast. The State Engineer's Office is a great complement to the Water Development Commission and Office, whereas Director Gebhardt sees to the projects that develops water. The State Engineer's Office has a lot to do with applications, permits for water rights, and then ultimately regulation of water out in the field as well. And so with that mission in mind, most of our statutes and direction come out of Title 41 and then even more specific chapters 3 and 4. And so this bill has to do with additions to an amendment to 41-3114, petition to change point of diversion or means of conveyance. We started off earlier this summer. This was an interim topic. And we've, even though I read the title related to petition of change, you'll notice that the term orphaned water rights often comes up as a descriptor for this. And by orphaned water rights, what that is when we put land under irrigation or we've used water otherwise, and then development, say, and this is just one case from cities and counties, may develop over the top of those irrigated lands. And as a result, there are times, in a perfect world, those water rights are transferred before the development, or they're dealt with to provide water within the development. You have an option, to continue irrigating even though you subdivided, for instance. But at times the development occurs and we don't dispose of those water rights properly. We don't transfer them. And as a result, then they may become orphaned. And so they're water rights that are out there not being used. And then at times difficult to change otherwise, or later on, or the worst case, they may become subject to abandonment. They may disappear altogether. And the issue with these are they tend to be very senior water rights as well. And so the more we can preserve our senior water rights, the better we're in a position to use the water properly, but also it kind of guards us from interstate issues, downstream water users that are interested in upstream water, and there's not a senior water right attached to that. We're also then vulnerable to certain losses of water that we might have rights to otherwise. So that's a brief introduction to what we call orphan water rights. We've met a couple times in interim, as I mentioned, with Select Water in particular. And I think I've reported out also to other committees the disposition of this bill. When we originally looked at this, it was a little more comprehensive. What you're looking at in Title 41 is a very small portion of maybe the whole issue. There's more to be worked on. For instance, there's changes in the city titles as well as county titles, Title 15 and Title 18, that we at once considered. Whereas in both of those, for cities and counties, they have subdivision regulations related to those developments. And so if we can get in early, for instance, when a subdivision occurs, we can then make it easier or a better process, in my mind, for transferring those water rights ahead of time. And so we're not dealing with them then later on when it becomes more complicated. For instance, after a subdivision occurs and we didn't take care of those water rights, whatever the size of the subdivision, say a 20 lot subdivision, then we have to deal with all 20 of those owners within there, perhaps in some cases, to transfer those water rights. And there are actually occasions when that subdivision draws in the entire city. And so we may have to go all the way back to, individual lots within the city itself in terms of trying to now change this water right, to put it in a different place, to change its point of diversion or its means of conveyance. So with that said, I'm going to walk you through, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay. Oh,
Yeah, we've got a question from Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just to kind of pile on the city-county subdivision issue, I think it was discussed that we were going to try to get out and meet with those associations and try to get their input on it, and hopefully maybe during this summer.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you, Representative Larson. That's absolutely right. Yeah, there's more detail to those that were peeled off through the summer discussions. Those issues related to cities and counties. We found, by the way, the statute for the counties is rather robust and reads pretty much like the way we would like it to read, with minor changes. What we would like to do ultimately is to look into Title 15, the city side of that, and somewhat mirror what we have in the county subdivision statutes and regulations. And so to that end, we determined, and rightfully so, there's several stakeholders that we need to get a hold of, and we have to have a lot more discussion related to that. Notwithstanding the Association of Counties, as well as the WAM, the Association of Municipalities, the realtors are interested in this, irrigators, stock growers, et cetera. We have a very long list of interested parties and stakeholders that we need to reach out to better define what we intend to do in those two statutes. Thank you, Representative Larson.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if you would like me to walk you through the bill, I can do that.
Yes, I see no more questions. I guess one that I have, it's not really in the bill, but you had mentioned it briefly and touched on it, how it affects the different water packs we have. You might explain that a little bit more and how this bill will help us in that respect.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are what we call a headwater state. A lot of our water originates in Wyoming, but ultimately drains or flows downstream to other states. As such, we have 7 compacts, in various basins throughout the state, and 3 court decrees. So given each of those has certain obligations as to what the share of water is downstream. And it's not uncommon. We meet annually in each of those with our downstream state partners related to those compacts and decrees. And there's often discussions of our total water use upstream, be that the amount of water, the forecast of water, or the actual use of water and the consumptive use of water. And there becomes discussions related to, gee, you're not using all the water, or in this case, these orphaned water rights, seem to be languishing. Maybe we can use those downstream. And so, and I don't want to make light at all of those discussions. They're usually, or can be, rather lengthy and very in-depth as to how we approach interstate waters.
Thank you, sir. I guess we're ready for a walkthrough on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first small edit in my mind is line 13. And you can see we struck out a portion and inserted require the petitioner to provide 30 days notice. This was just kind of an editorial change. You'll see the strikeout on 15 also refers to the petitioner. So we just put that in a spot where it seemed to make more sense. When we go into this, a change in point of diversion it's up to the petitioner to do all the legwork. They'll petition the board or the state engineer to change their diversion from the stream, say to their new location of, for some reason. The stream may move, for instance, and that head gate may not even be appropriate or work anymore. They may need to move it for that purpose, or they may need to move it for other reasons. But it's up to the petitioner to then take the lead in putting together the petition and setting the hearing in this case. We'll set the hearing, but they have to do the legwork, and plus they have to, provide us with not only the details related to testimony, but the ultimate record afterwards. Part of that process then is reaching out and advertising and getting a hold of those folks that may be affected by that. If I move my point of diversion from one spot to another, especially for those users in between that new point, each of those may be affected, and we need to know if they have any issues at all with this change in point of diversion. And then ultimately, either myself or the Board of Control will weigh in as to whether or not there's injury involved there. Are they taking more water? Are they somehow affecting those interveners, we call them? And so that's what the overall we're talking about here. And as a matter of fact, this was put together to make it easier for the petitioner, not only easier, but also less expensive. That one example I gave you where they may entail, an entire subdivision, a huge subdivision, a large subdivision, or even the city, means that they would have to then advertise and reach out to all of those potential users, whereas many of them don't have any right or access to the water, but it's just simply a process. So overall, this bill lessens that burden for them. If there becomes then, and you'll see as we begin on the next page, line 3, quite an insertion there related to if there is then at least 20 owners or appropriators or owners of users of ditches and facilities, then we can lessen the burden from registered or certified mail to regular mail. And then below that, and by the way, that's the biggest cost related to certified mail or registered mail. Say if there's 100 or more, at $5 or more under certified or registered mail to just simply regular mail at whatever that rate is today, 50 cents. So it takes that cost burden off, or it reduces it for extraordinary petition requirements. And then also it includes advertising in a local newspaper, classic language, just to capture those that we may not have found during the process of going through the hearing process. That is, Mr. Chairman, the summary of this bill. There's been changes and edits to it from the summer sessions. And so you're kind of seeing it in a more or less perfected form as per, Select Water in particular having made edits to it in the past.
Okay, committee, do you have questions? Thank you, Mr. Lanning. Oh, we got one here. Go ahead, Representative Clausen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Director. So just to be clear with this, it doesn't change anything for change of use for anybody or any change of use permit that's got less than 20 people to notify. It's just for very large notifications. Is that correct? Just to paraphrase the whole thing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Clausen, that's correct.
Okay. I guess a quick question is why doesn't it include the smaller users? Like, let's say you've got a small water system that involves 3 land users and someone's going to make a change. This doesn't affect them, but do they use the same mechanism to make those changes?
Mr. Chairman, yes, for the most part, the question then becomes, water rights obviously are a serious right, a property right, that some may be affected by, so these notice requirements were intentionally set a high bar for either registered or regular mail. Back in the day, they wanted to make sure we captured absolutely everybody that may be included in this. So we didn't inadvertently leave somebody out, and they were affected. Their property right was affected. So for those users less than 20, they're usually the ones that needed to be contacted. Relatively robust. The extreme examples that I gave you for the city, or 200 say users, the majority of those aren't even necessary to be noticed in my mind. They're not affected. So we continue to capture the true core interveners from a point you may have on a typical petition 3 or 4 interveners. There really aren't directly affected. There aren't that many, quite frankly. So the cost still remains for those smaller examples, but even at say the maximum 20 at $5, that's $100. There's still a cost there, but not necessarily a large cost related to the need to move that point of diversion.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions? Yes, Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, I thank the state engineer for his robust explanation. I do want to ask, I know it says registered in the in section F, and I wonder if at times we're not using certified. And I did look that up and have the difference. I wondered if you had that, but.
Mr. Chairman, that's a very insightful question, Representative Larson. I appreciate it. It still does read registered mail. And my guess, back in the day, registered mail was the gold star, the gold standard, if you will. Registered mail is over and above certified mail. I even had to look it up as well. This was a discussion in earlier committee meetings. Registered mail, stands alone. It doesn't go with regular mail. It follows a certain path. It can take more important goods. You can insure it up to $30,000, $50,000. And then the carrier will then give you a complete dossier of exactly where it went and how it arrived. Certified mails, one we're more familiar with. It goes regular mail, and then you get the little green card and you sign that you received it. And then the sender then receives that green card back. And pardon the use of that term, but a certified receipt of that. So it's a little bit less of a standard, even though it continues to read registered mail. There are times, by the way, historically we've used certified mail, and we've gotten opinions on that and related to, gee, you're not using registered mail, but if it becomes a matter of practice or it's written in our rule as certified mail, it's been deemed okay. As far as the difference between registered and certified.
Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, a follow-up. I agree with what you said. I kind of wonder if what would your opinion be if we change that to certified mail in that section? And if you had a clarification with the Attorney General or anything. I did see that registered mail costs like $12.60 is what I saw. That's quite a bit more than a $6 or $5 amount. And so that's, if you could answer that, that would be great.
And we do, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson. I'm finding these inconsistencies elsewhere, by the way, in our practice. And my guess is throughout the state, other agencies may have this kind of same issue. I think registered mail comes from much older uses, for instance, or statutes in this case. As to, so my preference, yeah, it would be great to have that read certified versus registered. And maybe Abigail can weigh in, off the cuff, I guess, related. I don't know if there's any other legal issues related to that or not, or my opinion.
Abigail, would you weigh in on whether or not this amendment would be a good plan?
Mr. Chairman, not knowing where else the state engineer is interpreting registered to be certified, if you change this to certified, it would be clear that the legislature interpreted it to mean registered and now wants it to be certified, which could potentially carry over to other statutes. You may want to gather up that information and make them all the same, or take a comprehensive look at it.
Okay, so you're saying if we change it in one place, we probably need to look at the other points in the statute, maybe do a whole cleanup bill at some point, not now. Is that correct? Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, yeah, therefore my interpretation, thank you, Abigail, would be to leave it alone at this point, leave it as registered, and we'll continue, and then perhaps a more comprehensive look, and then come back later with, additional changes or consistencies throughout. It might be a good exercise for us.
Okay, well, any other, yeah, go ahead, Representative Larson. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I hate to keep talking about this, but I would like to get a clarification from the Attorney General that we're all okay. I guess that kind of worries me that somebody might come back and say, well, you didn't send it by registered and you said you were going to, and now this is all null and void, and that's pretty important to me. Would you agree,
Yeah.
State Engineer Lanning?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, absolutely. And if we can clean it up in this one, knowing that I've got more homework to do, at least this helps in this individual case.
Okay, Abigail, do you think that would be a suitable way of doing it? Clean it up in this bill, and then we'll have the state engineer's office and staff be looking at other statutes, and we'll bring that later, maybe not this session, but when we find other ones, so that everybody's clear on what kind of mailing they need to do. That's a question for you, Abigail.
Mr. Chairman, I think if you are sending certified mail under this statute, then the statute should read certified mail. How that impacts other statutes for the SEO, I can't advise on, and I don't know. And that would be a question that Mr. Lanning would need to look at.
Okay. I'm unsure of any place else that it mentions in this part of statute. Why don't, okay, a suggestion I would have, Representative Larson, if you're good with it, is we'll do a little bit of research on that, see if we can change this bill. We won't do it today maybe, but we might bring that amendment to the floor when we have it. You'd rather, I don't like doing it that way either, but it's a way of being able to say that the legislation will be clean and not muddied up by a simple change. In page 1, we have registered mail on line 14 towards the end of that one. It is not in the enacting sentence, or the acting sentence.
Mr. Chairman, on page 2, line 8, it also registered
Okay,
mail.
right.
Chairman. Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Representative Blackburn, would it be better to maybe table this then until our next meeting and we figure this out, or would you rather take it to the floor?
I think I'd rather get this thing out since we've had the discussion. We might have some further research on it. Yeah, I'm convinced we could change it to in every place it says registered to certified. And I think it would be a way of cleaning up, maybe as we go, some statutes that are a little muddy with which is what.
Mr.
Right.
Chairman, I will make that motion.
Okay, moved by Representative Blackburn to change,
Mr. Chairman,
yes, Representative Larson.
point of order, I'm sorry. Did we have any public comment? And I don't know if we moved the bill.
Still shaking off rust. We'll go there first. And so at least we didn't get the motion made before we went further into this. Abigail, be thinking of some more input on why this could be problematic. And do we have public testimony? Well, go ahead, Abby.
Oh, no, Mr. Chairman, I was just going to let you know that Brett Moline does have his hand up and would like to have public comment.
Mr. Moline, welcome to our meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm hoping you can hear me okay.
Yes, I can.
Brett Moline, Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation, sitting in support of this bill. What I'm hoping is that what would happen is that this bill would help facilitate keeping these water rights straightened out, and so that we get them done earlier. It'll facilitate making it easier. That's our stand on that. I would support going to certified rather than registered mail. In a previous life, previous job, we would send things by registered mail. Typically, a lot of times when you get something by registered mail, it might not be good news. And so people would just refuse to accept it. You had proof that you sent it out, but you did not have the proof that they had accepted it. With certified mail, if I understand it correctly, you at least have proof that it was delivered to their mailbox. So, and helping to cut down the cost, and I would support going with that. I understand there might be ramifications, but I would encourage the committee to look into that to help lower the cost and get things done. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll shut up and sit for any questions.
Committee questions for Mr. Moline. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Abby, do we have anyone else in the waiting room?
Mr. Chairman, you do not.
Okay. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Been moved by Representative Blackburn, seconded by Larson. Okay. Discussion on the bill.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Representative.
I'd like to pursue that amendment.
There you are. Go ahead, Representative Blackburn.
I'd like to pursue that amendment we were talking about, certified, change it to certified.
Okay. I think that would be in two places. Am I correct? Oh, it's been seconded. Thank you, Representative Larson. Go ahead, Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, if I could maybe interrupt his amendment a little bit. I think we do need, I'm worried that we need to word that right, certified with return receipt. There, you can do just certified and you don't get the return receipt. Is that maybe what
I think
our state engineer would agree with that? I'm not sure.
Mr. Lanning, you can jump in if you'd like. That probably with a receipt. Okay. Sounds like that's good. Are you good with that, Representative Blackburn? I'm pretty sure that's what you meant to say.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
All right. Committee, any further discussion on it? I see two places that we would change it. Page 1, line 14, and then wherever the other one was on page 2, line 8. And I would say any other place that it needs to be changed that we're not seeing. I think that's it though. Abigail, do you have that? Any further discussion then on this amendment before we vote? I think in my
Question.
yeah, it's in the, we'll get a little bit more of a legal look at it before we take it to the floor as well. So we wouldn't have to be as concerned with it. So question's been called. All those in favor of the amendment, raise your hands. Okay, I have 8 ayes and opposed, 1 no. Okay. Motion carries for that amendment. Any more discussion on the bill?
Question on the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Question on the bill. Abby, we'll do a roll call vote now. Please.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote on House Bill 45. Representative Blackburn, as amended. Representative Blackburn,
Aye.
Representative Clausen,
Aye.
Representative Fortner,
Aye.
Representative Heiner,
Aye.
Representative Larson,
Aye.
Representative Western,
Aye.
Representative Worf,
Representative Worf votes aye.
Representative Winter,
Aye.
and Chairman Eklund.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, House Bill 45 has passed out of this committee as amended.
Okay, thank you. So committee, the next bill for our consideration will be House Bill 51, meat processing programs. And thank you, Mr. Lanning. We appreciate your testimony and help. I'm guessing we'll have the Department of Ag weigh in on this. And we're caught up, I'd say. I don't know how long these things, you know what? I think I'm gonna take a 5-minute break, and that's a real short break, but most of us can break anytime, and I needed to go get some water, so I will. We'll be back in 5 minutes. Oh, are we, most of the members back? You know, I'm looking for Representative Larson. Are you,
Turn your camera on, John.
pardon me?
I don't think your camera's on, Chairman Eklund.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I oftentimes refer, I'm trying to find my cursor. I often find describe myself as the hillbilly of technology in the House of Representatives. So my apologies. There it is. I couldn't find the little arrow. So a couple of little house cleaning things I should have done at the beginning and should have started yesterday. Representative Larson, you're the chair of Select Water, correct?
Yes.
If not-
Well, co-chair, I guess.
Yeah, well, of the House Chairman of Select Water. So the way I would have preferred to have handled this, and we'll probably do it when we get to the next Select Water bill, is I'll turn over the management of the committee to you on any of those bills. And I can either present bills or assign bills, and I'd like to assign the omnibus planning bill to you. You're probably as well versed in it as any of us. And
That would be great, Mr. Chairman, if that's what you want. Thank you.
I do. And the other thing, so my vice chair this year is going to be Representative Clausen. And in the past, Representative Larson's done it. He's now chairman of the Select Water and has had quite a little bit of experience doing this. One of the things we try to do is develop leadership in our legislators. And one way of doing it is to occasionally give over the management of committee meetings is the best start. And that could also be extended to other members of the committee. So if you're interested in chairing a committee meeting, let me know. And we'll do it. But I don't really want to do it until you're comfortable doing it. So that's kind of how we'll run those meetings.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes. Who do we have?
Representative Blackburn.
Hi.
I'll
Representative.
carry HB 45 on the floor.
Okay. Which one is that? That's the
Last one,
change.
the last bill.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. Now, committee, one of the reasons you want to keep a few notes and try to keep handy the information that we get from testimony is that's not in the bill. And I think more than anything else, for me, and I think I can speak for a lot of House members, we like to know what went into the bill besides just the reading of the bill. All of the House members have the bill before them. The genesis of the water rights bill, the reason for having it, the reason for the change on registration to certified, things like that. The House members would probably prefer knowing. So that's why it's good to keep notes, especially if you think you might want to manage the bill on the floor. So, and I'd rather not have to manage them. I'll be there to help any way I can. And other members, you need to be ready to have input as well. Representative Larson, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I have other questions if I could ask.
Yeah, go ahead.
Will we be re-referring bills to JAC, and will that happen when we get into session?
I presume that it will. I don't think, I'm trying to think of rule changes, and normally it does have to go. Abby, you had your hand. You can
Mr.
help.
Chairman, I believe JAC is planning to look at some re-referrals next, oh, I could get this wrong. Hope Don's not watching. Next Wednesday morning, if they can. They are planning to hear re-referrals before crossover, is my point.
Okay, and before we present them on the floor too then.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we'll see if that's correct. I presumed we'd run some of it the same way as we normally do, Representative Larson. Any other questions? From anyone? Okay. So our next bill is the meat processing bill, and I'm looking for the number. It is House Bill 51. We have the Department of Ag here and maybe others, but I guess I'll turn it over to Department of Ag to walk us through this program that we're hoping to. Well, let's see. How do I put it? Go ahead and walk through the bill and what it does.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. In order to introduce myself, first off, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Doug Miyamoto, and with me is Stacia Berry of the Department of Agriculture. For the information of the committee, for those of you that may not know, we just recently, within the past couple of weeks, concluded a meat processing expansion grant program within the Department of Ag using CARES Act funding. And that program ended on December 30th, at least the cutoff for, providing reimbursements. We're still making some cleanup reimbursement payments to meat processors from around the state. But the program that we had implemented over the past several months mirrored this proposal in House Bill 51 in a lot of different ways. And I wasn't sure if some of the newer members of the committee were aware that we had launched, implemented, and now concluded a program that's similar to this one. Our Deputy Director, Stacia Berry, was instrumental in the design of that meat expansion grant program. She was the one that basically did the bulk of the administrative work along with some folks at the Department of Ag. We kind of took an all hands on deck approach to implementing this program very quickly. And so we were able to get that program up and running much faster than a traditional grant program of some government agency may take. So it was a good experience for us. And generally speaking, with this bill, we got about $10 million of CARES Act funding. We received somewhere over 50 applications for that amount of funding that we had available. We did our program as a cost share opportunity. It was a 50% cost share program that was specific to meat processing, and you had to be a certified meat processor. You had to be licensed processor to be eligible. You had to be able to address the food supply chain in terms of meat, getting meat into the food supply chain in order to ease the effects of pandemic on some of the meat plant closures that you may have heard about over the past year. So there were some things that made our program a little bit different than what's proposed here, but essentially the big ones are that we ran this program as a reimbursable program, and we did it as a 50% cost share program. So those people that applied for grant dollars had to be invested in the project themselves, and we only paid them after they had come out of pocket for those initial expenditures. We'd be happy to answer any questions about the program we just ran, and then we do have some points of clarification that we would ask the committee's consideration on House Bill 51. And with that, Mr. Chairman, if there's any questions that the committee might have for us, we'd be happy to take those on, and I would like to turn over any responses or further testimony to our Deputy Director, Stacia Berry, as well, if that's okay.
Okay, Representative Fortner, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, the starting the program don't seem to be an issue in Campbell County. The big issue in Campbell County, what we're facing is USDA standards I would almost think you'd be ahead to put that money to battle on that and get Wyoming their own standards so we could operate within Wyoming. It seems to me that that's the biggest holdup. Like I say, there's plenty of ranchers and plenty of people willing to already invest money, but we need to knock back them federal standards and get Wyoming needs their own. What's the possibility of making that happen? Thank you.
Okay, so
Mr. Chairman, Representative Fortner. Meat processing all falls under federal law. So the Federal Meat Inspection Act is the authorizing federal act that Congress passed many decades ago now. It's been revised several times since, but those federal standards are the minimum that must be achieved in order for legal processing of meat within the United States. And so even those plants that fall under our inspection as the State Department of Agriculture, we have plants that we provide the inspection service. We have to comply with the Federal Meat Inspection Act, and our program within the state has to be the same as or equal to the program that USDA would offer. So my answer to your question is, what do we need to do to establish our own independent standards for meat processing? I don't think we can do that within the confines of federal law at this point. So we also have to operate under the standards that USDA prescribes that make us compliant with the Federal Meat Inspection Act.
Okay, so I guess I would interject something here. We have kind of two levels. We have, I think nearly all of our state operated plants are state inspected, and they are state inspected at USDA standards. And then some, and what would be a better thing if you did have the USDA inspection as well, it gives you more flexibility in marketing and what have you. But we do have kind of two things that go on, but it sounds like they're both state, the state as well as the federal are under the same guidelines. Representative Clausen.
Mr. Chairman, Director Miyamoto, in the last program that you just got done implementing, was there funds for a plant to step up from one level of certification to the next, whether it be custom to state inspected or state inspected to USDA? And was there interest in that portion of the program if it was there?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Clausen, yes, you are correct that capability was available through the grant program, and there were plants that wanted to make improvements toward that direction. Most of the plants that applied initially as either wanting to come under federal inspection, or they wanted to be custom exempt, or they wanted to be state inspected. I'm not recalling any off the top of my head that were desiring to switch from one to the other, but there may have been one in Hudson.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Clausen, if I can answer, we do have one state inspected plant. Director Miyamoto is correct, in Riverton that was a grant recipient in this program and is transitioning into federal inspection. The higher level of interest that we saw, it was from custom plants, asking questions about whether or not they could upgrade their inspection levels to state inspection. And so that's one plant or one level of inspection we haven't talked about yet this morning, not being state inspected or federal, but those custom plants. We have 29 custom plants across the state, and we did have questions from those plants about their ability to make those changes. However, our program only lasted from September 15th until December 30th. So there wasn't a huge amount of time for them to make some of those changes, but potentially given more time, some custom plants may have an interest in increasing their inspection level to state inspection.
Okay, questions are answered. Representative Heiner.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Director Miyamoto, there was a significant amount of money allocated to the Department of Agriculture from the CARES Act, and a lot of those funds have been encumbered or spent already to various farmers and ranchers. Could you tell me, do you know how much is still unencumbered that could be utilized for this program?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Heiner, I think that you might be talking about some of the broader farm and ranch assistance programs, and those dollars went to the business council. The bulk of the dollars meant for agricultural relief through CARES Act dollars went into the business council as opposed to the Wyoming Department of Agriculture. The only money that WDA received for CARES Act implementation was this $10 million that was specific to meat processing programs. And the rest of that money, and I believe it was something on the order of $90 million, that went into the business council and was administered by them. And so the way that our program broke up, though, to answer your question, we got an initial allocation of $10 million. We allocated $5 million of those dollars. And so far, we've got about $2 million that have been reimbursed to our participants to this point in time. So that gives you an idea of the scale of what we had.
A question I've got, the bill we're looking at, is it administered by the Department of Ag? It is, isn't it? Not the Business Council. Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
That's what I thought. And so the 10, several questions. The money that wasn't used up from CARES funding that we have in this, written into this bill, any of that CARES funding money can revert to 2021, correct? Or did it end what money that we had? Are we kind of?
Mr. Chairman, I am not sure of the status of that money. You know, we were asked early on in the process, all the way leading up to December, to identify how much of that money we thought that we could turn back to be rediverted for other purposes relevant to the COVID crisis. And so we turned that money back, but where it went after we relinquished control of those dollars is something that I don't know the answer to.
Okay, I think it's probably one I would get from the governor. Executive probably. Okay, Representative Heiner, you've got another
Yes,
question.
just to follow up, in this bill, as I read it, it says there is going to be a reappropriation to the Wyoming Department of Agriculture for $20 million from the federal funds appropriated in the 2020 special session. So is that $20 million then available to be reappropriated to the Department of Ag for this purpose?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Heiner, I don't know if that money is available or not. I don't have specific knowledge of the balance of the master account, so to speak.
Abby may know. She has
But
Abigail.
I'm just not aware.
Yeah, Abigail, can you help us a little bit with this before we move on, committee? You're muted.
We can't hear you.
Mr. Chairman, I can't help you on this, but Joe Budd has raised his hand. I don't know if he can. Would you like me to put him into the meeting?
Yes, go ahead, Joe. Come on into our meeting. Welcome. And we'll get to the rest of the committee here, but we'll see if we can get this part cleared up. Be good to know ahead of time whether we've even got the money to do it. I'm presuming that we will make amendments to be able to use the money, but do we have anything firm on whether it reverts?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, good morning. Joe Budd from Governor Gordon's office. I believe that the money that was diverted back that Director Miyamoto talked about has been allocated or at least marked for other programs, but I can find that out exactly what those numbers are for you and get that back to you if that's acceptable.
Okay, so if we work this bill, we're presuming that we've got $20 million to work with, I think, on top of what the Department of Ag has already used back in 2020. So I'm guessing we have to proceed with the bill as if we've got that 20 million. Is that what you're suggesting?
Mr. Chairman, I can get that number back to you today, but like I said, I believe that when the roughly 5 million that went back from the 10 million that was given to Department of Agriculture, that 5 million went into, I believe some of it went into endurance fund, and other places where we had huge amounts of asks compared to, say, like the ag fund. And so I can find out today and get that back to you before the close of business.
Okay.
But I guess for the purposes of this conversation, as far as I understand the bill, this would be another 20 million from any CARES funds that were not allocated yet, that would then be diverted back to Department of Agriculture for the purposes of this program. So I think the assumption made by the bill is that there is that money available. I can't speak to right now how much money there is.
Okay, I thought we'd have something firm here at the committee, but that's fine. Thank you for your help. Representative Fortner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is to the Department of Ag. They've already got the meat processing program up and running. Why do we need House Bill 0051 now at this time if they're already been up and running?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Fortner, I believe that House Bill 51 was conceived prior to the implementation of our meat processing expansion grant. This was a topic that was debated by the Joint Ag Committee prior to us launching the meat expansion grant program. There was pressure, obviously, from the beginning of the pandemic all the way through the fall to try to relieve some pressure on meat processors nationally. And so we wanted to do this program, and Joe with the governor's office and the governor just stepped in and made an executive decision that we were going to put money in a pot and we were going to launch a program and implement the program as quickly as possible. This was all happening concurrent to the drafting or the consideration of this legislation. So I don't think necessarily that House Bill 51 considers the fact that we did do a program.
And this program is expired.
And our program was inspired by the conversation that Joint Ag had about meat expansion grant programs anyway. It all just kind of came together at the same time.
I guess my next question would be, how viable is this program going to be in the future? Is it just going to be a one-shot deal where we no more need this bill than the man in the moon, or do you see it being, you guys getting more CARES Act money through the Biden administration or whoever? That's my next question.
This program is over.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Fortner, this program was contingent on CARES Act funding. And so the way that we looked at it was that it was a one-shot deal. We didn't have any indication that there would be additional money forthcoming through CARES Act, and it had a lot of stipulations about the eligibility of the use of those funds. And so we approached the program as if it would be a one-shot deal for our meat processors across the state, and tried to write some eligibility criteria to get that money into the food supply chain as quickly as we could. So we did look at it as a one-shot program.
Thank you.
Representative Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Miyamoto. So it looks to me like this was put together during our special session. Am I correct?
I don't think.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I think it was done after the special session.
Thank you.
I think it was done during the interim. What I would say is that yeah, Representative Clausen can add more to it, because I'm wasn't on the Ag Committee in the interim and had no clue that I'd be sitting here today when they were discussing this. But this bill would be taking unused, reappropriating unused funds from the CARES Act with the assumption that we could revert it from 2020 to 21. And that's how it's built. The whole bill is built the same way. Department of Ag, it would be a one-shot deal. It wouldn't be a continuing program from what I can see in the bill. Representative Clausen, can you help me, or Representative Larson and Winter?
Mr. Chairman, I was just going to add some clarity that it was passed at our last meeting with the assumption or hoping that the CARES Act funds would be extended so we could use them in the future, and that they weren't all allocated. And I'm guessing since there's appropriation in this, the leftover CARES Act funds will probably, this bill would have to go to appropriations, and most of that would have to be ironed out of what's left goes where. But that was the general idea when we developed this, that the funding would be extended. So.
Yeah, Representative Wharf.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm wondering if we should set this bill aside until we know, because I don't feel comfortable moving a bill forward that has $20 million in it that we don't know whether that even exists. And rather than expend our time on that, I'm wondering if we should set this aside and work on the next bill, and maybe Abigail can work with Mr. Budd to get some type of an answer so we can pick this bill up if we have an answer. Sounded like he might not get an answer until after our meeting's over. So,
yeah. Mr. Budd, do you think you could get an answer before the answer might not, we might not have the answer because we have another, well, I think Mr. Budd needs to go ahead and discuss what's going on with some of this presumed CARES funding version that we would have. Go ahead, Mr. Budd.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just reached out to our budget expert over here, and she informed me that at this time we have 19.5 million that is unobligated. So that would not cover this bill as currently written. It may be worth consideration of this committee on whether or not President Biden does something in terms of a program, but I think Representative Wharf brings up a good point, sir.
Okay. So we can go ahead, Representative Larson. You're muted. For some reason, I can't hear you. Dan, you're still muted. Now it says you're muted, but try it again. Huh. Haven't got it. That's frustrating. Can you talk now that your box lit up green? Try it again. Okay, you're still muted. Did you check that little X on your sound deal, or?
Your mic's
Microphone's off. Maybe that'll help.
There you go.
I can't hear you guys very well now, but I just was going to ask, did these need to be obligated by the end of the year? Is that not what I understood?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, that is correct. The funds needed to be obligated by December 30th of 2020, and there's really two reasons for that. One of them was that the initial slug of money that came from Treasury had that as an expiration date up until like the 28th of December. That was when all of those funds had to be allocated and spent by the states to which they were sent. So you had that federal requirement on the one hand, but in addition to that, the legislation that was passed by the Wyoming legislature during the special session also put an expiration date of December 30th, 2020 on any funds that would be allocated through the CARES Act and our subsequent efforts. So you had a state requirement that those funds be allocated and spent by December 30th. You had two. You had federal and state. Both of them required that any money that was allocated through this process be done by December 30th. So when Congress extended the deadline for the use of CARES Act funding, that didn't have any bearing on us at the Department of Agriculture because we still had a state requirement that we had to have the money expended by December 30th, and that was in state law. And so I think there were a lot of moving pieces at the very end of this program. And the way that we operated our program was just under the supposition that you had to have those receipts that you were submitting for reimbursement prior to December 30th, and that was how we were going to look at our program here.
Okay. Representative Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm getting more lost by the second here. So if we have a state law that says we have to use that money by December 2020, are we spinning our wheels here, or we have to go back and change? What do we need to do?
My guess is that if we were to proceed with the bill, we would change dates. And probably if the money were to revert and we were able to use it, we would work on this bill to get the dates right, changing those. And then we'd have to kind of wait and see whether or not we're allowed to. So the session laws, and when we received the CARES funding, it was supposed to end at the end of 2020. And there's more than a little bit of talk that states that didn't get it used up, that were working on things, could continue on. Well, we were able to put something together by the Department of Ag. This is supplemental to that same program, only it would be a different program entirely contingent on CARES funding. If the CARES funding didn't come through, we worked on the bill, we changed the dates, and we got it ready for the floor. CARES funding doesn't come through, that it would go to appropriations, who'd put a 0 on it, and it would effectively kill the bill. So maybe our best bet would be to table the bill. I'm not sure. I don't mind if we had time to work on it, maybe we go back to the other bill, get it worked on, and if we still have time, we could consider this one again. Representative Wharf, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that we table this. And if there's a reason to pick it up at the end of, or I guess if there's time appropriated, we can pick it up. But I think we should table this and until we either have more information or until we're out of time.
Mr. Chairman, do we have to move the bill before we can table it?
You're right. And we haven't, Abby, do we have anybody else wanting to testify on this bill?
Mr. Chairman, nobody has their hand up.
Okay. So we, I'm trying to think back. Representative Clausen, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I do have one person who just did. Sorry to interrupt.
All right, Lisa Johnson, you're somewhere there. Come on in. Welcome to our meeting. You're muted. There you are. Hi.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Agriculture Committee. I'm Lisa Johnson, representing the Wyoming Economic Development Association. I just wanted to let you know that we are interested in this bill because there has been this economic activity in every region of Wyoming. And I understand that there's some difficulties and technicalities to be worked out, but I just wanted to express the interest from the Economic Development Committee in meat processing, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Committee, any questions before we? Okay, thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
So Abigail, procedurally, do we have to move this bill to table it? Because we might, if we have time at the end of this meeting, we might bring it up for reconsideration to have it ready for the floor in case we have something firm on what happens to the leftover CARES money.
Mr. Chairman, I will have to check on that really quickly. I'm not sure off the top of my head.
All right, Representative Clausen.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. As a matter of procedure, if for some reason down the road the funding isn't there, this will have to go through the Senate side as well and through appropriation. So I think it's fairly safe. We won't, it's not its final reading that it has to be perfect.
Yeah, I think we'd be able to change some dates. Still got time. Why don't we set it aside for now and we'll work on the invasive species? I don't think we have to move to table it or anything.
Representative Warp had his hand up, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, go ahead, Representative Warp.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that's what I was just going to say is let's just to keep moving along, because I know we're going to run out of time. I would say let's just, we haven't moved the bill or nothing. Let's just visit the next bill on the agenda. We can come back and make a decision. Maybe by that time, Abigail will have a information for us as far as whether it needs to be moved or tabled first.
Chairman's decision.
Okay, let's go ahead and we're going to move on to House Bill 53. We may or may not be done with the last bill, invasive plant species. And I think Department of Ag going to present this, or?
Mr. Chairman, this is Doug Miyamoto at the Department of Ag. I believe that you have some representatives from weed and pest districts and also our weed and pest coordinator that should be available to you in the waiting room to testify on this bill.
All right.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
There are about 6 people in the waiting room. I can bring them all in now if you want, since it's not a huge number, or we can, when you want to receive public comment, bring them in one at a time.
Okay, why don't we just bring them all in and they can raise their hand or let us know when they have some input in the bill. It'll be presented by Weed and Pest then.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Slade Franklin, Weed Pest Coordinator with the Wyoming Department of Agriculture. Happy to work with the bill, but if it's all right with you and the committee as chairman, Joe Budd from the governor's office may open up this discussion since this is tied to the governor's invasive species initiative, and then we can go to the bill from there.
Okay, Mr. Budd, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to give a little bit of background since there are some new members and talk a little bit about the bill. The governor supports this bill. And I think Weed and Pest has some very minor changes that they'll suggest that the governor supports as well. But as mentioned, this bill aligns very well with the governor's invasive species initiative. And that final report came out in October. Happy to share that for committee members that may not have it or have not seen it. But the governor's invasive species initiative was roughly a year-long process that brought together 32 stakeholders, including legislators, and really worked on some recommendations for the governor and for others. And if you want any more information on GISI on that initiative, I'd be happy to do so. But if it's all right with you, I would just highlight a few things in this bill as you work the bill here. So
You're okay with that? We'll think. I don't see any hands, so go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I think the major highlights that we've looked at over here is the addition of 11.5.120 in section 1. It's probably the most sweeping example of alignment with the final report that the governor's invasive species initiative went through. And it has some new duties for Weed and Pest Council and potentially for the districts, but very much feel that will help them be more efficient and effective with the public, private landowners, our colleges, and state and federal agencies as a whole. So in trying to get to a broader approach to combating invasive species in the state, this seems to be a very practical step. The other important piece that I would point out for the committee is somewhat of an evolution in statute and the removal of 303B, which is the special management program, just some requirements that were within there. And it really allows the districts to expand those special management programs. And I'll let them talk about that in depth if you have questions. But The other piece in here is that that again aligns with the GISI's final report very well. But this bill also covers invasive plant species as a whole rather than just the state or county designated noxious list, which really becomes important in some species like cheatgrass that may or may not be on a county list and not on the state list. So I think the other changes in 11.5303 are going to help districts again function more effectively and clarify some processes while maintaining that public input piece and making folks aware of approximated costs. So it should, the hope is that this would help scientists and landowners and the public as our invasive species challenges change, our districts can adapt to that and really be effective. So again, Governor wanted to express his support for this bill, and if there's any questions specifically for me, I'm happy to answer them, but I think the districts will cover some more things in depth for you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, committee, Representative Fortner.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm from Campbell County, and we do an excellent job with our weed and pests for the money that they have. For what I see in this bill right here is I see added government, added agencies, things like that. We're going to be going to the air probably 50 to 70% more is my guesstimation for weed control, because it's just got so far out of whack, with the methane, the oil, and all that in play. We got a huge weed problem. But anyways, I see a funding mechanism is what we need. I don't see a bill. I see we need more revenue for our county weed and pest to deal with it. They're really good at documenting where the weeds is at. And as a commercial weed sprayer, I and everybody else in the county, we work in lockstep with our weed program here in Campbell County, our weed and pest. I don't know if we need a new bill for that. I think we just need more funding. Thank you very much.
Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Budd, I think he already went over this, but I may have missed it. But we're asking to repeal 303B. What was in 303B? I should have done my research, but I did not. I apologize.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Heiner, I'll give you the Cliff Notes version, but I would ask Mr. Franklin to add in, or Mr. Shorb if necessary. But essentially, it put a limit on the number of species they could have, the districts could have in a special management program. So it used to be 2, if I'm not mistaken, and this would open it up so the districts have more latitude in the event that priorities shift during a year or something happens in the spring and they need to move from one to another within a special management program. But I'll let the districts and the council add if that's all right, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from the weed and pest.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Slade Franklin again, Weed and Pest Coordinator, Department of Agriculture. Specifically to Representative Heiner's question, Joe Budd is right. There's a specific clause in that statute that restricts the districts to utilize those funds for only 2 species. They have to identify those 2 species early on. So what that does is that takes out that and allows them to utilize the funds on various species based on what landscapes they may be working on.
Okay. Any other input? From the
Mr. Chairman, this is Luke Sander, the Sheridan County Weed and Pest Supervisor. We support this as well. We have 2 mills. Currently, our first mill, 46% of that goes directly to the city, and then we have to run all of our general programs with the remaining of that first mill. Our second mill, we have 2 species, which is leafy spurge and salt cedar is what our board's chosen. But it gets kind of difficult to explain to landowners when they come in and want to know if we can help with some more invasive grass funding or a grasshopper issue that comes up. We have to sit down, and it's hard to explain to them that, yes, we have $600,000 in our special management checking account, but we don't have that in our general, and we can't help you fund these other problems that have arisen with this other account because we're tied with the 2 species. So it'd be very helpful to be able to help landowners with things that arise.
Okay, maybe could, Mr. Sanders, could you explain the funding mechanism of, because this will be funded by mill levy, correct? But in a
Mr. Chairman, Representative Eklund, exactly right. So we're allowed to collect up to 2 mill levies. So there's no additional taxes right now. It's freeing up what we can do with the current money that we collect. So we are a special district. And so we have our own mills collected through the county, and they go through the commissioners into us.
So you'd have a 600,000 pot of money that could be used on your targeted species plus what the invasive plant species.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Eklund. So that's just an example of Sheridan counties right now. A lot of our landowners didn't have money to do grasshoppers and leafy spurge last year, so we didn't spend a lot of money out of our second mill program because they were more concerned with grasshoppers. So we do have a little bit more in our special management fund that we could help landowners with. So currently, yes, it's a bigger account that's just sitting there waiting till we can do bigger programs with either leafy spurge or salt cedar the way it is. Reducing, or not limiting what we can use it on, we can definitely help landowners a lot more with other programs.
Okay. Is it becoming more clear for the committee how this bill changes things? Yes, Representative Wharf.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I guess when I look through this, I see a lot of words like developing and coordinating between the weed and pest and the new council, weed and pest council and the weed and pest districts. And I guess I'm wondering, why do we need a bill to tell them to coordinate and implement this stuff? I mean, is there some resistance from the local weed and pest? Are they not wanting to do this stuff already with the weed and pest council? I'm not familiar with the council, I apologize, but as I look through this, I see there's no fiscal impact, but all I see we're doing is we're telling them to coordinate and develop, and I'm just wondering why we need to put that in the statute.
Yeah, would anybody care to?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Slick Franklin again. Can I kind of maybe add or kind of talk about that question a little bit? So the Wyoming Weed and Pest Council has obviously been in place before this bill was drafted. And, working with the council on a lot of the issues that they work with, there are a lot of things in this bill that I would say the council is already working on as the 23 districts, holistically trying to deal with. It has been brought up through the Governor's Invasive Species Initiative that we really need to look at this from a statewide perspective and not just individual district perspective. And so I think what the Governor's Invasive Species Initiative is trying to do is trying to really corral some of the things that maybe we're already doing and justify what they're doing on the state level and keep moving them forward and giving them some backing.
Okay.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead, Representative Wharf.
I guess the question I have then is, it sounds like we're changing the focus from having the local districts basically driving it to maybe making it more of a statewide process. Are we in fact going to be growing government through all this development and implementing and coordinating? Is it going to lead to higher cost? Or I mean, what's the feel of, I guess, both parties involved, the local weed and pest districts and the weed and pest council? I guess that's a question I'd like answered.
Now, so who might
Mr.
have?
Chairman, can I start just with the council end of things there? And I won't say this is a direct answer. We have the council president on the call here and obviously a couple of the districts, but one of the key components that I know at least was brought up in the GIS is that we did not want to interfere with local control, especially with the local funding that was there. So I think that was a key component that was at least discussed and brought up continuously through the process. But I maybe defer to the council president in the districts that give you their feelings on the bill and how it would impact them individually.
Yeah, so council president, which of you gentlemen?
That would be me.
Oh, hello, Mr. Smith.
Chairman.
Go ahead.
Larry Smith. What we see out of this is mainly it's going to help our 2 mill counties to be able to use their resources a little better, or in their in the way they see fit, so that they can cover some of these issues. You know, the rest of the counties that aren't using this second mill, we're hoping there's a little bit of teeth in there, maybe to get some of the other agencies to help in and contribute to some of these projects. I can defer to Mr. Shorb. He's a little more up on this than I am, so.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mr. Shorb. You have input to add?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. A lot of this language comes directly out of the Governor's Invasive Species Initiative, and it kind of just puts into statute what came out of that initiative and what's been going on for a long time. It's not going to be growing government at all. The Weed and Pest Council and different variations has been around since the 1930s. The districts have been doing a lot of this stuff. I think what some of this is driving at is it's like what Mr. Smith said, it's going to help some of the different agencies and entities out there, UW and community colleges, to kind of put together efforts to a more cohesive plan and try to formalize what's going on across the state and across the different districts. So I think I'm a supervisor for Park County Weed and Pest up in Powell. We wholeheartedly support this. We support this bill. And like Mr. Smith said, the 2 mill counties, about half of the districts in the state access the second 2 mills, about half of them just the one. It's going to give the ones that have the 2 mill counties, the special management programs, it's going to give them a lot of flexibility. As you may be aware, in 2015 or 16, new invasive grasses were found in northeast Wyoming, Medusa Head and Ventonata, and that would give those local boards a lot more flexibility to access those funds on a short notice. So if another county was out there and discovered a large problem, they could reallocate those funds to address the problem right now, or if there was a severe, outbreak of Mormon crickets or grasshoppers or something like that. So it's going to give a lot more flexibility out there to address problems, especially with new invasive species on short notice. And it's going to give the council and districts and a lot of different agencies and the people that were involved in that task force the abilities to work together and try to come up with a cohesive plan and codifying what we are trying to do. There's 2 little items in this bill that we are suggesting. I sent those out to the members of the committee last week, and I could go over those with you if you'd like, or to address that at a later time, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead and do that now, please.
The 2 suggested edits that we have right now would lie on page 2, line 6.
We'll get her.
We would suggest changing the word control to management. It might be a semantics issue, but we thought that would refer to more of an integrated pest management model or integrated weed management model. So we wouldn't just be talking about control in spraying a weed, but we'd be talking, addressing the control, the education, cultural issues and all that kind of stuff, and a overall management plan. That's why we suggest that change.
Okay, where's that at again?
Mr. Chairman, it would lie on page 2, line 6.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead. Representative.
my internet was messing up and I missed what Josh was going to add.
So he's suggesting a change in the bill from control to management, page 2, line 6. So that would be an amendment that we would consider in the bill. So it would read developing and implementing data systems to support each district in making invasive plant species management decisions informed by accurate. Am I correct, Mr. Schwarb?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
All right. What was the other? Good.
Mr. Chairman, the last suggested change we have would lie at the end of the bill on page 6, line 7. It would be in section 4. We would ask to change the date of July 1st, 2021 and change that to July 1st of 2022. That would allow the council time to discuss within themselves, advertise, seek input from other groups, and go through the process of formulating, of getting those rules together. I'm afraid by, with how the legislative session is going to go this year, with it being drawn out, we may not have time to be able to complete that process, especially with the busy field season coming up on us, beginning in April.
Yeah, so people that don't know, our weed and pest council works similar to a conservation district. It's different, but it's a set of volunteers and trying to meet during a busy season. More than likely, your hands-on agriculture out in the field at that time. So I can see why you'd request a change, because rules sometimes take a while to establish. Representative Blackburn. I'll get to you, Representative, if you still have a question. Go ahead, Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just kind of an add-on to Representative Fortner's question before. Is it Mr. Schwab? Is it?
What?
Yes, sir. I just wondering, we were talking about how this not going to grow government. It's not going to be a cost to people. But when I read this, when we talk about it on page 2, line 9, line 7, talking about coordinating with the University of Wyoming community colleges, are they set up already to do that at no cost? Or are they going to have to hire people or move people around, and then next year or the year after come to the legislature and say, oh my golly, we got to have money so we can support this? What's your thought on that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Blackburn, I hesitate to comment on behalf of the University of Wyoming or the state community colleges. Right now, they have people on board, and the Weed and Pest Council and the Weed and Pest Districts, we already coordinate and work closely with the University of Wyoming. Whether they're going to need extra money or funds of support, I'm not sure. I can't speak to that. But what I was referring to, there's not going to be any increased government or manpower on behalf of the districts or the Wyoming Weed and Pest Council to address this bill.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go ahead, Representative Blackburn.
Yes, sir. So if we kept that portion in this bill of deleting 115303B, that seems to me like that gives the districts power to use their mills on as many species as they want. Isn't that what we're trying to do anyway?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Blackburn, I think that is the goal. Right now, how it works in that 303B, you're allowed a combination of two species, one either a weed or a pest, and one of them has to be leafy spurge. So the other one that they've had to deal with in their district, really, they only have one other option. This would give the boards the option to have more species. The boards could opt to just keep it to the 2 species that they already have, but it gives a lot more flexibility to address these invasive species issues as they pop up around the state. Like I mentioned earlier, those new annual grasses, Ventonata and Medusa head, it's kind of colloquially known that if you have those species, you would wish for the good old days when you just had cheatgrass. I know over in Northeast Wyoming, when those showed up over there, it kind of caught everybody by surprise. And having those tools available to add more than 2 species would have really helped some of those boards over there and give those directors the ability to address them quickly.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually have a question for Mr. Sanders, who's actually a constituent of mine, lives right there between Dayton and Ranchester, right off 14. It's a fine place, if I don't say so myself. But my specific question is, it sounds like there's a lot of data sharing and information sharing. Do you see this bill as a benefit to, or are you guys already kind of doing most of this? Would it make you feel better if we put it in statute, or where do you come down on this?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Western, so we're pretty lucky in Sheridan, and this invasive grassing hit in a good area. We have really good working relationships with all the federal, state agencies, the university. We really came together, even on a national level, and had a lot of good cooperation. And I don't want to speak for other areas, but I think there may be a lack of cooperation from different agencies, and to possibly put it into writing. And, maybe that's just the talking point where they can start building relationships and working together on bigger projects. We like to work on projects that incorporate a larger area with a bunch of different landowners instead of just hunting and pecking around the county. So, like I said, we've been fairly lucky, but I think possibly having it in writing could help the rest of the state.
Mr. Chairman, follow up?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So I guess with that being said, let me ask a question of the Department of Ag. So it sounds like you guys are doing some of this, but there's room for improvement on data sharing, all that kind of stuff, information sharing between districts, between the state, between colleges, the University of Wyoming. How much of an administrative burden would this place on you guys? Because if you look at the bill, as I read it, it doesn't name any specific data sharing coordinator or whatever you want to call it to make sure that this information is stored in one place. It's easily accessible by the university, by the college, by our weed and pest districts, and by the Department of Ag. So I assume that the department will act as kind of that data sharing coordinator for this bill.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, a great question. And it's almost maybe worthwhile a little bit with each of these sections to explain some of the things that were thought about with the GIS that would answer those. And specifically with your data sharing question, for instance, the University of Wyoming, because of the Governor's Invasive Species Initiative, has started their Institute for the Management of Annual Grasses and Natural Ecosystems. And one of their key components to that is trying to coordinate that data sharing just within the state, but also regionally, so that information is in centralized spots. So that is a program that the University of Wyoming is already starting to kind of address some of the concerns that were brought up in this bill. And this is the bill, or not the bill, but the Governor's Invasive Species Initiative report. So they are already trying to address some of that data sharing. And then I think it's, I guess maybe to answer a question that was kind of posed earlier, the university was a key component in terms of developing the Governor's Invasive Species Initiative. So I think they're aware of all the components, both in this bill and the report. Again, can't answer for them on what the financial need is, but they certainly are aware of those coordinated requirements that were brought up, or recommendations. So yeah, Representative Western, to answer that question, the university's already taken the lead role on this to some degree. When it comes to, I believe it's page 3, line 5, when we talk about the biennial report that would be presented to the Joint Ag Committee, that would probably be something that within my department I would take the lead on developing and putting that information together.
Mr. Chairman, follow up?
Yes, Cyrus, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it sounds like there's already kind of the architecture, the framework already in place that to do some of this kind of stuff. This is just simply saying that this is kind of the information, the kind of projects, et cetera, that these districts have to share with the colleges amongst themselves, the university, and of course, the Department of Ag. Would that be kind of a fair statement, that this just simply codifies what's already being done and kind of incentivizes, what's the right word? Perhaps slower to act stakeholders to kind of get with the program and share the information that they do have?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Western, I think you're right on track. It really is kind of creating that guidelines for which the council does this data sharing and working and networking together. One thing I would like to bring up with this is, I believe it's in page 2, line 17, when it talks about coordinating with the university, it talks about applied research within there. One of the things that was discussed within the governor's report was the need not only for the universities to share their research data better to the ground, but with the district supervisors and what their knowledge is in actually managing weeds, sharing it back up to the university system so that there is a networking of applied research that is going on based on what their knowledge is and what the university knowledge is. So yeah, I think there's a lot of the components have already been developed. I think this bill is just trying to establish that, you know, this is going to be the priority areas that the council should be looking at moving forward.
Hey, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I know we discussed this quite a bit in the Ag Committee during the interim. I do have a question on page 5, and this deals with any district to implements a special management program under this article, section V. It talks about how they will not be public with the bill. There won't be any publication in the newspaper anymore. So what is the intent on how the information will be distributed? That kind of concerns me.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we did talk to them about now, and just back up a little bit. Obviously, you guys have heard this bill kind of deals with 2 different sections. It deals with the primary weed and pest law and then the special management program. And this gets into that special management program development. When we were talking with the Joint Ag Committee about this section specifically, the bigger concern that we brought up is the original language talked about the final approval of the program being by the district supervisor. And we felt it was more important that the district board, as appointed by the county commissioners, is giving that final approval. So our focus was mainly on cleaning that up. And we talked about giving the public notice still is important. But because this may be variations, especially with early detection rapid response species, 10 days may have conflicted with the ability to get that in place, depending on what treatments you're doing, if it's especially a pest. So we wanted to make sure that that public notice was in there when we were talking about it. And I think that's what came out from the LSO was the language you see for that part.
Mr. Chairman.
Follow up.
Yes, thank you. I still am concerned about that. I just don't know if that means that you're going to mail out notices to lots and lots of people or what. I almost would prefer it be in the paper unless you can try to talk me out of that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I won't talk you out of it, but I'll tell you what I expect most of the districts will do. Will probably still use the paper, but I also see some of them utilizing their individual websites to make sure that that information is provided for the public. And maybe a combination of both.
Mr. Chairman, I can speak to that if that's all right.
Yes, Mr. Sanders, go ahead.
So this last summer, we had a grasshopper program and we tried to get a lot of landowners to sign up early. We put an ad out in the newspaper for a couple months. And right around the time the grasshoppers were terrible, I had a mob at my board meeting and they were all very upset that they didn't know about it. And so I told them about the paper and I would say 8 out of the 10 say, you know, we don't have time to read the paper. We don't subscribe to the paper. We don't get the paper. And so that was one of the issues that we're going to try to do some different ways to raise awareness this year through the website or mailings or stuff like that. But just an example from this year.
So you can expedite a new program under these guidelines, these changes that this bill gives you. You'd be able to start up a grasshopper program before the angry mob comes in and tells you their crops are eaten and gone. But I'm guessing that does, correct?
Mr. Chairman, I think we would still have to give notice, but it could be quicker notice, put the information on the website, and have them comment on the program before we get going onto it without putting it in the newspaper directly. But yeah, the public notice is definitely still an important part, in my opinion.
Okay, Representative Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand Representative Larson's concerns, and and same with Mr. Sanders. I think obviously the public does need to be included. We could amend this to simply say that notice shall be given to the public through a medium at the discretion of the local weed and pest board. So whether it be advertising on Facebook or any of those kind of options, local newspaper, radio, all that kind of stuff. If we put the wording in there where it gives these weed and pest boards, kind of greater discretion at how this should be notified to the public, as long as we keep the shall be notified, the public shall be notified in there. That's my suggestion.
How does that sound, Representative Larson?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I don't know if I'm really excited about that. I think we definitely need to keep the newspaper in there and then add other medium determined by the board would maybe be okay with me.
Okay, we'll discuss it further when we get into the working the bill. Representative Wharf, go ahead. Representative Clausen, will you chair for a couple minutes? I'll be right back.
Certainly. Did you call on Representative Wharf?
Yes, I did.
Go ahead, Representative.
Yes, Chairman Clausen, I appreciate being recognized. I guess one of the questions I have, when I look at the bottom of the bill under Section 4, it talks about the Wyoming Weed and Pest Council promulgating rules. And I really, I believe we are abrogating our authority as a legislative body. The council is appointed by the governor. And I just think that we need to understand what we're doing. We're setting up a council that is primarily representatives of the executive branch, and they're going to draft rules that our constituents all have to abide by. That's what that means when we give them the authority to promulgate rules. And I just myself, I know I'm going to vote against the bill just for that reason. I think there's a reason things are in statute, and I understand the desire to try to make things flow easier, but I have concerns that we're allowing the executive branch to get more involved in this. I think it works better under local control. And I guess I want to give them, the people that are part of the Weed and Pest Council, an opportunity to rebut that. But the way I see that is we're creating more burdensome rules and regulation process that our constituents are all going to have to abide by now. We're talking about having to, now they got to follow what we do in the legislature, but they're also going to have to follow what we do through rules and regulations. And it goes back to the fact, I think this is growing government, and right now there may not be cost tied to that, but I think ultimately there will be increased cost as we go down this road and we grow and grow. But that's my take on this. And I guess I want to give them an opportunity to speak on that, because I am probably going to vote no on this bill for that reason.
So Representative Wharf, the promulgating rules is fairly common, but I'll let either Mr. Slade or Director Miyamoto speak to this about their process.
Yeah, Representative Clausen, if I could maybe address that concern, and I'll start a little bit. In current law, the Weed and Pest Council is defined by our current law. It's a representative from all 23 weed and pest districts with the Department of Ag as an ex officio member. What we are doing here is we're actually replicating the rulemaking process that is in the first program statutes for the weed and pest, and making them consistent where it says the Wyoming Weed and Pest Council, they will obviously be involved in creating the rules and regs and have to approve them as a council, but it will also have the approval of the majority of the board, and that's referring to the Board of Agriculture. So it'll be a two-step process for the approval of the rules and regulations, obviously following the Secretary of State's process. And just as a side note too, we do already have it's Chapter 57 rules and regulations in place for the special management program. And so we would probably, with whatever this bill, if this bill was to pass, would have to look at that Chapter 57 for amendments to those rules and regs to adapt it based on the final language.
So, Mr. Slade, so you already have rulemaking authority, and this doesn't really give you any addition. It's or just on a portion. Yes.
Yeah, Representative Clausen, what it said right now is that the Board of Agriculture had that authority for rules and regs, and we wanted to make sure the Weed and Pest Council was part of that process for the rules and regs for this special management program. So they would probably draft those rules and regs.
So the Board of Agriculture would draft it. You would just suggest those rules and regs.
Yeah. Mr. Representative Clausen, probably the council, what we've done in the past with other rules and regs, the council will draft them, approve them, and then the Board of Ag will have final approval on them.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
I think Representative Fortner had his hand up.
Well, I had a follow-up, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Representative Wharf, go ahead with your follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess that is my point. It is an expansion because currently the Weed and Pest Council does not have rulemaking authority. And I just want to make that clear. This is expanding that. In the past, there wasn't a Weed and Council that was here to do that. So it is an expansion, and I just want to make that clear.
Representative Fortner.
Thank you, Mr. Clausen. My question is, has anybody done a study to show us that this is going to save money or that there's added benefits here? I just don't see it myself.
Mr. Slade, would you like to take that question?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, interesting question. I think, first of all, since the report did just come out in November, I guess a financial assessment of it, I haven't seen any or known any plan, but I'd say one of the things that has been included in the Governor's Invasive Species Initiative and is included in this draft legislation is the discussion on page 2, line 9, when it gets in coordinating with the university and talking about the socio-ecological systems. What we're referring to there is in the Governor's Invasive Species Initiative is the need for risk assessments that talk about both the ecological and the economic impacts of the species that the state is dealing with. So I don't necessarily have an economic impact of the bill, and how it's going to be in terms of costing down the road to do all this, but it is certainly one of the things we're looking at from the invasive species end of things is what those economic impacts are of the species.
And before I hand this back over to Chairman Eklund, just for you guys that haven't been around here a long time, the Weed and Pest Council, some of these things that are in this bill, they do already, but it's a little bit herky-jerky and is in working with the university and working with other agencies. And a lot of this codifies just current practice of what's happened over the years, and some of it directs them in a more in the direction of what they're doing already. So, Chairman Eklund, would you like to take back over?
Yes, thank you, Representative Clausen. So I think I caught most of that conversation. One of the things you need to understand that the council is appointed, they're usually appointed because they have expertise in this area. A reason why I think this bill would be important to at least try, we could kill the bill down the road if it started causing problems or was going to cost too much money. In a couple of years, we could say, well, maybe it wasn't such a good idea. what it's doing is trying to target certain weeds that are becoming a problem, giving the districts a little bit more flexibility, and I kind of understand that. It sounds like they usually target a couple of species, and this would throw in maybe one or two more. An example I can use would be, I don't know if any of you know about Dalmatian toadflax. That was more than likely a pretty flower that my ancestors brought to their gardens when they first got out here 20 years ago. Oh, that's further than that. I don't know how far I'd go back. Maybe 40 years is the first time I ever saw it. And there was no proactive approach. It wasn't a noxious weed. It was just a flower out on the rangeland. Now it's something, it's harder to kill. I think it's worse in our region than leafy spurge is. And leafy spurge would be another similar example. And we have not proactively dealt with things like cheatgrass. Until recently, I think it was a semi-noxious weed instead of a noxious one that they couldn't even target. Well, maybe they could. I'm not sure how that works or how long that's worked, but I can see some benefit of the bill. I'm not convinced that it would expand government beyond what we already do and the functions that are already in place. But committee, more questions? Well, we've got experts here to help us along. Okay, Representative Western, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would say that, I think there's plenty of room for debate on how beneficial much of this bill may be. And I recognize and certainly appreciate Representative Wharf's. I do think, though, the real kind of meat of this bill is on the last page of the bill on page 6, line 5, where it repeals 115303B, because as we heard from Mr. Sanders, that this is a legitimate handicap for some of these weed and pest districts for them to really do their job. If they're getting complaints from landowners and from ranchers, but their hands are tied statutorily to fight some of these invasive species or insects or whatever it is, if we leave that still in statute, we're kind of handicapping some of these weed and pest districts for them to fully do their job. So if we kill this bill, we're also going to leave that on the books and make the jobs harder for our weed and pest districts.
Okay, Representative Heiner, go ahead.
I agree with the good representative about that section 303B. As I read that, I don't know why that is already codified. That it pretty much hamstrings our weed and pest districts. If something new is coming out, they don't have the ability to go out and respond because they only have 2 undesirable plants or 2 pests or combination of the 2 to be able to focus on. And so if there's something new that comes out, they have to put that by the side and table it until it becomes a crisis. So of this whole bill, I think I agree that's the meat of the bill right there, is to delete or repeal that part of the statute.
Okay. Okay, we have some more testimony. I can see Mr. Moline is chomping at the bit. Go ahead, Brett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brett Moline, Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation. Supporting this bill, the things about the coordination, do they have to be in there? No, it should be something that we should be doing already. And I think most of the time it works pretty well. I don't think there's any harm in codifying it. I do appreciate the repeal of that section. Visiting with one of my members up in Crook County, that they had the special mill levy, but they only had 1 weed on there. When the mountain pine beetle became such a large infestation, because they only had 1, they were able to utilize some of that funding for. They had some funding available to help slow down the pine beetle on private land. So I think repealing that section's a great idea. having the Weed and Pest Council, having the authority to write rules and regs does not bother me a bit. Those are essentially some of the people closest to the land, since they are members of the local, the county boards. So having that ability doesn't bother me, because they're going to have the input of the locals. As far as, keeping an eye on what's going on as working for Farm Bureau, that's part of my job. And more of my members are becoming aware that they need to know what rules and regulations are coming out. They need to keep an eye on what's going on at the county level, as well as the state and the federal level. So having these rules, I think, would be good. Written correctly, they'll facilitate what goes on in the local districts, and each district will be able to do what they need to do there. So sitting in favor of this bill, Mr. Chairman, with that, I would sit for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Moline? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee.
More questions for any of our panel while they're here? Yes, go ahead, Mr. Baumgartner.
Yes, Chairman Eklund, members of the committee. I'm Bob Baumgartner, supervisor of Goshen County Weed and Pest, and I would definitely like to speak in support of this bill, especially primarily the repeal of the 11-5-303B. Reason being, we are a smaller funded district. We do pull a second mill, and that repeal would definitely allow us to give the taxpayers more of their money back. As you are aware, in most counties, we have separate areas of the county that have more issues than others, and currently being tied to leafy spurge and the other pest of which we have designated as prairie dogs. Repealing this, it would give us more flexibility to put more of that money, like you said, Chairman Eklund, towards Dalmatian toadflax, towards some of the other problem species that we have in different areas of the county. So definitely the flexibility that this bill would allow us would be huge. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, sir. Yes, Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow up for Mr. Baumgartner, I understand how repealing that section 303B would benefit the local soil conservation district, and as you're battling those things. But part of this bill says that the University of Wyoming will assess and provide a socioeconomical analysis of invasive species. How would that benefit you on the ground level, to have that the University of Wyoming spend a lot of time studying these things and giving you a big report?
Currently, the University of Wyoming helps out the weed and pest districts in the current status. They're always there to help us understand and to also understand the economic problems that some of these weeds pose. So currently, the University of Wyoming is already helping the weed and pest districts to assess some of these economical challenges.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Kennedy, how are you? Welcome to our meeting. Go ahead.
I'm very well, Mr. Chairman. Keith Kennedy on behalf of the Wyoming Association of Conservation Districts. And we fully support this bill, especially that repealer. I think it's important for members of the committee to realize that giving weed and pest districts that flexibility will very much in the long run decrease what is spent. For example, members who served on the interim committee are very familiar with the Ventonada and Medusa Head issue up in Sheridan and Johnson counties. And being able to respond quickly there in the long run may very well decrease costs over the long run. The other point that I would make on the early section of the bill, in large part, I believe that this is so that districts have something codified and perhaps some additional research from the university for their interaction with their federal partners. I think it's important for us to remember what a large landowner the federal government is, and codifying this may also very well help individual districts when they interact with their federal partners. And with that, I would welcome your questions.
Committee questions for Mr. Kennedy. Okay. We have further testimony. Looking, speak up if I'm not seeing you. Oh, Representative Heiner, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry for the late response to Mr. Kennedy. But a question there, one of the observation that I've had working with the BLM and some of the federal departments, they are very, very aggressive with invasive species. And so by codifying this, I'm not understanding how that will improve the battle against invasive species on federal lands, because they are very aggressive already. So help me understand how codifying this will actually improve their response to that.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Heiner, based on my experience, and I actually had worked as a custom applicator for many years, I would say that experience is not consistent throughout the state on the part of the federal agencies. And perhaps someone that could correct me, but I believe we interact with at least 3 different Forest Service districts, as well as at least 2 different BLM offices. And were that were consistent across the board. And in my interaction and in ours, often we are pointed back to what is codified in state law? What should we be doing to help? And that, not that it would improve it a great deal immediately, but it's one more arrow in the quiver, if you will.
Mr. Kennedy, something I'd add before I forget. Experience has been similar. We've got a lot of biodiversity. In my mind, we've got an animal that's a pest that was reintroduced, and the states. I don't know if this would have made any difference, but it will with some of these plant species. You get to the mountains and you've got folks that are intent on having biodiversity, so the Canada thistle needs to be left alone. And my experience hasn't been the same as Representative Heiner's concerning some of these things. Unfortunately, I'm not as, it's more private land and we're able to manage it ourselves, but this would be another tool in the toolbox to help with that if we've got government partners that aren't interested in controlling some of the weeds on their land. Representative Fortner, you had a question.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to say, once again, I think the issue is money for our weed and pest districts. I know, I've been there, I talked to them. I don't think it's more regulations or more committees or any more hoops to jump through. Just find a mechanism to give them more money so they can go to work. They know how to hire people that the criteria they need. They're experts at that. They got well-documented maps all over our county, I know for sure, in Johnson County and Sheridan County. I've worked in all those counties. We don't need new laws. We don't need new bills. Just find a mechanism to give them some more money so they can man up and do what they need to do. Thank you.
Well, we've got panelists here and district, weed and pest district people. I'm not sure. I think all the money you use is presently comes from the mill levy, correct? All of it. Okay. So
Mr. Chairman, may I answer that a little bit?
Yeah, Mr. Franklin, go ahead.
Yeah, so with the 23 weed pest districts, they do have the availability of two different mill levies. One for their primary program, the second mill for that special management program that we're discussing as part of this bill. There is also some grant funds that we run through the Department of Agriculture, some federal grant funds we run through the Department of Agriculture. But one of the programs is the pesticide registration program that last year legislature approved, where we're utilizing funds from the registration of pesticides going out as grants to the district. So there is, I'd say the anchor funding for the districts is certainly their mill levies. There are some various grant funds that come through the state and the feds that also supplement those.
Okay. Yes, Representative Clausen, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to just speak to some of the Representative Fortner's concerns. This bill actually does free up funding for our local weed and pest districts. Some of those funds that are locked into the special program, it would free up for use in different species. And I think that, I hope that relieves his concerns. This bill actually does free up some funding.
Thank you, Representative. Any other comments, testimony, questions? Mr. Schwarb, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Adding a little bit to Representative Fortner's thoughts. Not only are there state and federal grants, we also have contracts with different state and federal agencies, as well as cooperative agreements. So, and a lot of those are longstanding year to year. And one of the nice things about some of those, especially with some of the federal agency contracts, is we're able to use those off their systems on adjacent private lands or state lands.
Okay. All right. Committee, do we have any further? Oh, go ahead. Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, I lost connection here a bit ago. Did we move the bill? And if not, I would move the bill.
Okay. Bills, that's where we were getting to. Good job. You're right on time. Moved by Larson, seconded by Clausen, Clausen. Discussion on the bill. Go ahead, Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make some amendments if I could. I think there's 3. I can do it one at a time, or I can do them all.
Let's do them one at a time.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, if I may, page 2, line 6, delete control and insert management as suggested by the weed and pest. Josh.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, seconded by Western, I think. Discussion on the amendment?
Question.
Question being called. All those in favor, raise your hands. 6, 7, 8. I'm not sure how many, Abby. I had 8. The amendment passes. Next
Mr. Chairman?
amendment. Yes.
It'd be easier to help count if those who are not committee members turn off their video. It will put you to the bottom, or it should.
Yes, and thank you everybody for coming. We appreciated the input, the help. Yeah, that would make it easier to count.
Mr. Chairman.
Next amendment. Go ahead, Representative
Thank
Larson.
you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 5, this is what I would like to suggest on line 10, starting on line 10, reinsert in at least one newspaper of general circulation within the county, and then add and other medium if determined necessary by the board.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Larson, seconded by Blackburn. Abigail, do you have that down? So we reinsert in at least one newspaper of general circulation within the county and add other mediums, I don't know, appropriately, whatever. I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, what I have is to reinsert the language, the newspaper of general circulation within the county, and then to insert new language and other medium if determined necessary by the board.
Mr. Chairman, that's what I have, and if rewording needs to be done, Abigail, I hope.
Sounds pretty clear. Discussion on that amendment?
Question.
Question being called. Raise your hands if you're in favor of that amendment. Well, I have at least 8, so it passes. The amendment passes. We have another one.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, page 6, I think it's line 7.
Yeah.
I may be not correct, but I think it's line 7, change 2021 to 2022.
Yeah, that was the request made by the council.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Abigail.
In looking at that, you may want to just delete that entirely, because then you're going to have your rulemaking due after the effective date of the remainder of the bill. It's a may promulgate, not a shall promulgate.
All right. So delete. Just have no date whatsoever. Okay, so we would delete not later than July 2021. And it would just, am I correct?
Mr. Chairman, that's my motion.
Okay. All right. Second. So if it would just take off, the Wyoming Weed and Pest Council may promulgate rules as necessary to implement this act.
Cyrus seconded it.
Cyrus seconded it. So discussion on that amendment. Okay, all those in favor of the motion, raise your hands. Okay, we have 9. It's unanimous. Okay, any other changes to the bill?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I did find a typo at the very beginning.
Okay. Fix it. We got time.
It's on page 2, line 1. I think the A at the very beginning of that line needs deleted. It's a plural.
Okay. So the motion would be, I can make that motion that we delete the A in line 1, beginning of the sentence. And it would just read coordinated and comprehensive plant species control programs, correct? Abigail? All right, we have a second. Seconded by Larson. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, that motion passes as well. Okay. Any further discussion on the bill?
Question.
Yeah, we got Representative Larson.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I just would like to say one more comment on how this board or council is, who are the members. And from statute, it actually reads, Wyoming Weed and Pest Council means the state council composed of one representative of each district as authorized in writing by that board of directors, and the director of Department of Agriculture or his designated representative shall serve as ex officio. And I think there's been some discussion on how they were chosen, and I believe that they're the weed and pest districts of each county will determine that, and more than likely it might be the president or it might be their supervisor. But I'm in favor of the bill.
Okay, any further discussion? Question? Okay. Hold on a second. Representative Fortner, go ahead again.
In the bill, that does not discuss anything about funding mechanisms, and it says that in the bill that it represents funding. I don't see no funding mechanisms in their bill.
Would that be the mills they're allowed to use, Mr. Chairman?
It would be, that would be the funding that they have. I'm trying to see where, and we've discussed that this legislation would trigger the ability to target other species, which they didn't have before. The repealer allowed that, but I'm not sure.
It says 11-5-303, program components, funding, rulemaking, authority, and penalties.
Where you at? Oh, I'm not sure where you're at, Representative Fortner. Where are you at on the bill? What page, line?
Well, I'm over here where it says duties, powers, and supervisor compensation. I can't tell you what page is that on because it don't have a page number on it. It's the second one from the end. It looks to me like second one from the end of the agenda.
So you're on the bill? Go ahead, Representative.
Mr. Chairman, so Representative Fortner, that's just simply referring just to what's already codified in statute in 11-5-303, what's already on the books.
Okay.
So is that going to be paid for by federal funds, state funds? Who's paying the funding?
Well, we've had to go ahead, Representative Clausen.
Mr. Chairman, so the funding streams for this is the normal funding streams. It's the mill levy that goes to the weed and pest districts countywide, and this bill just frees up some of that funding that was earmarked for 2 specific species that they can move around. And I think that's where Mr. Fortner was lost. So, yeah,
I know our weed and pests they're only taking about a third of their funding that they could get. But they're needing more funding than that. I mean, the county's having a hard time giving them that. So I know last year when they was spraying Ventonata, they had to shut the program down about halfway through because they ran out of funding. With this new program set off by the governor, what's the benefit if there's not more funding in it for them?
Okay, so who shut down they're allowed 2 mills, and the county commissioners prevented them from increasing what they were receiving?
They're only getting about a half of their mill levy, and that's all they've ever had. I mean, they're eligible for I think a full mill or a mill and a half. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they run off the funding that's allotted to them, and they're real thrifty. They do an excellent job of managing their money over there. They ended up having to shut down their Ventonata project last year, and other projects as well because the funding runs dry on them, you know. And the benefit of this committee, I would think, would have some additional funding to it, or there would be no reason to sign on to it. I would not think.
Yeah, Representative Larson, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I think by statute, they can, each district can do 2 mills max. I hope that's correct. And my county actually doesn't do.
Okay. We could.
Correction, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. My county does 1 mill. What do I know?
Okay. All right. You're allowed 2 mills? If you want to go into the second mill, do you have to, do the county commissioners have to okay this? Because I'm guessing that's where Representative Fortner's going with this question.
Mr. Chairman, I think you better bring somebody on board that knows.
Yeah. Mr. Franklin, there you are.
Mr. Chairman, again, that section the representative is referring to when it talks about program components, funding, rulemaking authority, penalties is already codified law. And the process in that codified law for special management program, which isn't identified in this bill, is the county commissioners may fund up to an additional mill for the special management program. So I think that's the funding mechanism. Well, that is what the funding mechanism they're referring to in that codified title. So that decision on increasing the mill levies, whether it's for the first mill or the second mill, sits with the district board and the county commissioners in the approval process.
Okay. All right, so I don't, without changing statutes and trying to force local governments to do something they're not wanting to do, this has to be something, sounds like it's between the local weed and pest district and their county commissioners. So I don't know as I really want to mess with that too much. But I do think that they have the ability to lobby and the people affected by whichever grass this was. I've heard of them. I haven't seen them yet in my region. I hope I never see them. But I can imagine why you're wanting to get on it real quickly. But I think the better means in trying to legislate something would be to use what you have at your disposal, which is a voice at the county commissioner meetings and with the districts, weed and pest districts. Representative Clausen.
A question on the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Are we ready, folks? All right, one more question. Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've interfaced with weed and pest districts on a local level, and they do a fantastic job with the resources that they have and working with the county commissioners and the citizens within their district. I am afraid that this bill will take away some local control that we all cherish and put that at the state level. Now, I'm very much in favor of repealing 303B because I think that puts a leash on them as they're trying to carry out their duties. But to pass the entire bill that I believe is not necessary just because of one good part, I think that misses the mark. So I'm coming out against this bill for the reason that I think it's overreach of government, and I would like to have more control in local hands than to put it at a state level. Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? A possibility down that line to think about is this bill isn't carved in stone, and it could be changed on the House floor if it remains alive. So I'd like to see it alive. I see the benefit of the bill. I can see some of the challenges. I'm not sure that it removes local control. We'd have to have a further conversation. I don't see that that's happening with it. Representative Wharf.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I spoke against this bill. I still have concerns I would feel a lot more comfortable, I guess, if we deleted everything and just gave the repeal, because I agree with what Representative Heiner just said. This seems to me like a whole bunch of fluff and stuff, when really what we need to do is just simply repeal statute 115-303B. But I just feel like I need to vote no on this, just because I do think it's going to ultimately lead to expanding government. And so I would feel better if we just repealed that, because I do think that's the message I got out of this, is that's what's needed. And I think all this other stuff is fluff. So I guess that's why I'll probably still vote against the bill.
Okay.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Okay, let's go ahead and vote. All those in favor of,
Mr. Chairman,
yes, Abigail.
would you like a roll call vote on this?
Oh, yes, I would. All right, we're voting on House Bill 53 as amended. Go ahead and call the roll, Abigail.
Mr. Chairman, House Bill 53 as amended, Representative Blackburn,
No.
Representative Clausen,
Aye.
Representative Fortner,
No.
Representative Heiner,
No.
Representative Larson,
Aye.
Representative Western,
Aye.
Representative Worf,
Representative Worf votes no.
Representative Winter,
Aye.
Chairman Eklund.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, that bill, House Bill 53 as amended, has passed by 5-4.
Thank you, Abigail. I'll go back to, this bill, we still have the ability, it's alive, we still have the ability to change it. And we're a fairly divided committee the way it is, so my guess is it will be changed when we get to the House floor. It's past the committee. So be thinking about how we do it and how it affects. I think there's one real popular part of it. We have to see how just repealing that section B affects the whole bill. We're not going to have time to finish the meat processing bill, so it's one that we should have some questions answered. I'm guessing by the time go ahead, Abigail.
Mr. Chairman, I did find out you don't need a motion on the bill in order, you would just need to move to table it on the meat processing bill.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Cyrus, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to table the bill until our next meeting so we can gain a little bit more clarity on some of the issues that we discussed.
Second.
Seconded by Worf or Blackburn. So did you have more to add, Representative Clausen? Any discussion on that?
Mr. Chairman, so I think the big issue with this, or the issue that everybody's hung up on this committee, is the session laws that and the dates, and there's a whole bunch of talk with this particular issue. We're going to have to change it on a grand scale, either the session laws or go back in and make new laws to change the CARES Act money date. So I don't think that's as big an issue as maybe is portrayed, but I guess that's up to the committee to decide. But I think it's fairly straightforward that those dates will have to be dealt with, maybe on a grand scale, to do with any CARES Act money, and I'm sure that we will.
Okay. Representative Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did get a text from Representative Hunt, and he said he texted me that the money's there. So the money's not the problem. And I concur with Vice Chair Clausen.
Okay, we've got one motion we need to vote on, and that is to table it. If we decide we're going to vote on this thing without the changes and we happen to kill it, I'm not sure I want to resurrect it as an individual bill. So that's a dilemma we have here. We'll vote on the first motion, which is to table it till we get more information.
Question?
Yeah, question. Or do we can, I think we can do a raise of hands on tabling, can't we, Abigail?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, raise your hand if you're in favor of tabling. Looks like 7 or 8. So we will table this bill till later. We have about 2 minutes left. 4 minutes left. That's part of the problem. We're running up against the clock because we have to shut off right at 12:30.
Why is that, Mr. Chairman? Why can't we go longer?
Well, the staff is all set up to move to the next committee meeting. So there'll be somewhat of a break. At 1:30, I know Ag's going to be back in, and I'm not sure what the staff members have. But if we didn't have that cutoff time, as you remember our old transportation meetings where we'd go till the wee hours of the night, we could go on and on. I'm surprised it took us this long to do these bills, but I've appreciated all the questions that everybody's had.
And Mr. Chairman, I try not to remember transportation.
Well, okay. And I think everybody's done really well. I can see the reservations some of the newer members have, because I brought up the same things as I recall in different committee meetings. Well, why can't they just go ahead and do that on their own? Well, sometimes it requires more law than you can imagine. We'll get back to the meat processing bill. I believe it's an important one that's kind of been a favorite that the former ag committee had worked on. So until we meet again, we might try a breakout room at some point, get to know each other better. I'd like to know more and more about you. We get to do that if we're in person, and hopefully we'll be in person at some point during this session. So this meeting is adjourned.